Good morning. Welcome to the February 13th work session. Thank you for being here. Our first item on the agenda is board member comments, but the superintendent has asked to offer some comments first, so this time I'd like to open the floor to the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to do as a reminder that I'm asking the board members that if you would please remember, we have asked that any concerns regarding my staff is sent to me. There's been some unprofessional emails, comments, some perceived threats in emails, and I would like for those to come to me and not to my staff. You know, I stand behind my staff and I know that they're going to do everything to uphold the policies and procedures that you all set forth as a board. And that's what my expectation is, and it's not a non-negotiable for me that they bend those policies and procedures by any means. So again, I'm asking if there are any concerns with my staff, that information is sent to me directly and I will deal with my staff. Mr. Chair, that's what I have to say this morning.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor to board member comments.
I got a few things that kind of run together, so bear with me, please. And they all sort of relate to the question of common purpose. First, and this is going to sound silly, but I want to start with it. I never use my parking spot. I'm not here. I became aware of a parking issue a couple of weeks ago. I don't care what the rest of the board does. I don't care about it being a policy. I would like the whoever is here in the district at any given time to use my parking spot. It's the best parking spot in the entire place. Or it's not my parking spot. It's the District 1 school board parking spot. You know, it sort of relates to the same reason I try to beg people to call me Billy, because I think we have far too much hierarchy around here. We don't have nearly enough common purpose. So, small things. Please do not let my prime parking spot go unused 30 days a year or 29 days a month. So there you go. Part one.
Can we talk about that for a moment?
Yeah.
So I'm in agreement with that, except on days when we're here, because there are times when I'm running late and you know would prefer to have a spot. But if it's not on the days we're not here, I would agree with that as well as far as my spot goes. I don't know about the other board members.
And on days I've come in for meetings that maybe weren't announced, there's been cars in my parking spot all the time, so I feel like they use them. I don't know. Which is great. I mean, I never complained. Every time I've come in, there's been a car, most days in my parking spot when I come for the audit committee and stuff like that, so.
Ms. Sellers?
We used to have them covered. You know, they went from being on post, and on non days, they used to be covered and just uncovered the parking spot, but then they put them on the wall, and I think Mrs. Worthington thought about trying to get something magnetic to cover them on non-school board
Or if you just let people know
days.
that on non-school board days have at it. It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
but I mean, it was just easier when they used to be covered for years. They had these little black covers that slipped over our parking spots, and they were just uncovered on board days. But then they put them on the wall, and you'd have to have some other kind of cover so that, because people could forget. I mean, you're busy, and so on board days, if you get used to parking there, you might whip in forgetting momentarily that it's a Tuesday or whatever. But I have no problem with that. And you talked about it as a solution, so maybe they can put some kind of magnetic thing over them and take them off. But Pat used to do that. She would take them off on board days.
So how do the other board members feel about that? Are we okay with that?
Mentioned it years ago.
Mrs. Fields, are you okay with that?
I don't see an issue with the parking spaces. If they want to park, they'll let them park.
Okay. Okay, so we're in agreement. So, Madam Superintendent, if you.
Yes, sir. We'll
Thank you.
take care of it.
Okay.
I want to foot stomp. That does not include handicap parking spots. We've had issues in our schools with covering handicap parking spots. That is a no-no at any time.
Of course. So that's ping pong ball one that ping pongs into another thing. You know, in the last couple of weeks, it's come to my attention that we're losing Tiffany Kumbi, who was the interface for our benefits with our staff. Apparently has an extraordinarily good reputation for customer service and responsiveness. Apparently, I've talked to her directly. Multiple people had tried to get her a job reclassification that could get her a little more money and a promotion. She doesn't have a college degree, but she has a whole bunch of certifications. In various ways, those efforts were thwarted, and now she is getting $20,000 more on the private market to leave us. So we are, for the sake of protecting a policy or a credential over time, we're losing a very, very competent person who was really well liked and a very difficult job. It's not easy to talk to people about their healthcare plans when they have complaints. I happen to be copied on and I think this is probably what Jackie was referring to. I happened to be copied on a exchange with a teacher who was angry about something, and Tiffany solved it like that. And I thought that Jackie and Mary and a whole bunch of people were copied on that email. So when I made my reply all, I thought I was sending that to everybody. So if I wasn't, I apologize for that. But I was very, very critical of HR's handling of this. It is my understanding that there were multiple hurdles put in the way of retaining her. And I think that relates to our sense of common purpose again, that we got fixated on credentialing and hierarchy and who has authority and not who does a good job. I think that's a massive problem here. And then it ping pongs into, and we'll get into the discussion of the actual issue, but the way we manage our internal stakeholders, the night that the school board, the night that the external operator story broke online, I was dealing with my parents, and I started to get tons of communication from our stakeholders saying, what the hell is going on with this? And, you know, I tried to answer them that night and others, but we let the ledger set the conditions for that story. And now, to our enormous credit, we jumped on that the first thing in the morning and fixed that. And I want to compliment everybody for that. That was, you know, all I ever ask is if we don't rise to the level that we should rise to, that we try to get to it as soon as we can. And we did in that case. Kudos to Jackie for the press conference. I would have been there had I not been in Jacksonville. Kudos to Rachel for putting that together. The response was good and excellent. We could have done it 2 days before and saved the entire thing. I mean, Eric had called me for a quote 2 days before that story ran. This is a big deal. Closing a school or outsourcing a school is a big deal to our internal stakeholders. It's a big deal to the 14,000 or so, 14,000 employees we have. It's a big deal to the 102,000 kids we have and the 200,000 parents of them. I mean, we have 250,000 stakeholders, at least, in internal stakeholders. We must communicate better with them. We must communicate the idea that we are in it for them. We must communicate with them that we are not about hierarchies, that we are about getting a job done in an empathetic and humane way. A wonderful example of that, to close this off, was the outstanding, beautiful job we did on the whole branding, the rebranding of the branding. Kudos to Rachel. Kudos to Jackie for having the courage to back that, to put our hands on that hot pot again. We've turned that into an outstanding educational experience, and we have won over even the most pugnacious of external stakeholders in it. That's what you can do when you communicate with people. When you work with them, when you take them seriously, when you listen to what their concerns were. So all these things relate together. They relate to the sense of common purpose. I'm not going to stop talking about it. Again, I apologize if that email only went to, my intent was to send it to everybody, as you know, emails can be funny. I am trying to be cognizant of what we talked about before. But I stand by the content of those emails completely. And anybody who wants to see them can look at them. And if you think I'm going to stop talking about this, I'm not. And it's going to be here through the new board that's coming. It's going to be here until I'm no longer on this board. It's just too important. Our people work too hard. They are under too much stress for us not to do everything we can to do a better job of managing them as internal stakeholders and preparing them for what we do. So anyway, that's it.
Well, I'd like to respond to that. I couldn't agree more that we have a responsibility to our stakeholders, and we want, there's nothing we want to do more. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. I can't say enough good things about the superintendent and what she's done and her staff have done to, I think really she's gone above and beyond what any superintendent in the state would do to try to solve this problem. And we're going to hear that solution in a few minutes. It's a creative solution. It's a win-win. I think it's one that's going to pass with the state. But in any case, we have talked about that openly in these meetings twice, and the superintendent has shared in public what her intent was and what her goal was to ensure that we not only were in compliance with state law, but also that we were taking care of our schools. And you know, Mr. Parrott called me as well and talked to me, and I you know, it's a tough job. Being a writer is a tough job, but I was a little surprised at the angle of that story. So I would offer that publicly. I think we have been as clear as we could be. We didn't get feedback from the state to the extent that we would have liked to, so we weren't sure what we could do. And again, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. You're going to have some comments, and I have some thoughts about that as well. I think, you know, the state has not been fair with us. I know you would agree with that, and it's been an exceptionally difficult situation. But I think on two separate occasions, I remember clearly talking about that and offering the superintendent offering her thoughts about that.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, sir.
There is absolutely no way the public knows what is said in this meeting in any meaningful way. The only way they know is when I post the videos. I mean, we don't even post our videos. If we want to say, hey, look at what we talked about this in the meeting, there are what, 50 people in this room at most. How is that getting out to the public unless I do it? I mean, I'm the only one putting the actual discussions online for people to see. I mean, we can rely on Eric or whomever, but we shouldn't. Why on earth would we rely on a third party to accurately communicate what we want to say to the public? Again, to 250,000 people, they are not ledger subscribers. We have a very capable and hardworking PR staff. In fact, I've been more impressed with our PR staff probably than any group down here since I've been here. And turn them loose, let them do their jobs and communicate with the public beyond here. We're not communicating with the public here. We're communicating with each other.
Well, that's a fair criticism, and I think a fair comment. And maybe could we do that, Madam Superintendent?
We've already been discussing it, Rachel.
Okay, good. Yes, ma'am.
I am a little confused why this story came out. We discussed it. It was in the paper before. Everything that I knew had been reported in the paper. This story came out of nowhere. We had not had another meeting. We had not, today is the meeting that we were supposed to hear. I don't know where he got his information because we had not had, it would have been improper for us to have put out anything before it came to the board. So I don't know how we could have stopped that story. He didn't call me. I didn't talk with him. I was in Tallahassee. I don't know how he did a reprint of the story when we had not had another meeting to discuss it. It had been reported before when we discussed it. Everything that I knew at the time had been reported in the paper, and today was the day that we were going to hear some final decisions, and then that story pops up with inaccurate information. But there was not it would have been improper for the superintendent to have put out another story before she met with us, to discuss it with us. So to me, I don't understand where the story came from. It was a new twist on old news, and so I can't say we should have known it was coming. I didn't know it was coming. It was an odd story that came out before it was ever discussed again.
Yeah,
Ms.
this is a
Fields?
new media. I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Ms. Fields?
Well, I think that we put the cart before the horse. And I think that there are three sides to that story. His side, our side, and the truth. And I think that we should have done a better job of directing Eric to wait until today's meeting. And after today's meeting, then we could have given him the information that was needed. I don't think that that was done. I don't know whose fault it is. It really is not relevant whose fault it is. We have to do a better job of communicating. That's one of our goals. That we want to be more transparent. We want to be better communicators. We want to tell our story better. All those things are important. Now, the email, I don't know which email Billy is talking about. The email that concerned me was the last email that was copied to everybody. And the comment basically was, we're going to get a new board, and believe that. And to me, that was a very threatening email. And I think that what we have to do, if we want our school district to move forward, if we want our kids to get the best education possible, we have got to let our superintendent of schools do her job. We cannot do her job for her. If we don't like what she is doing, then we need to request a vote of confidence. We need to determine whether or not we're going to trust her to do her job without putting our hands in everything. And if we don't trust her, then we need to get rid of her, in my opinion. That's the bottom line. She cannot do her job if we all have our hands in it. That's not our role. At our last, I wasn't here at the last board meeting, and that's a whole nother conversation that I'll have later. But prior to that, basically what I said, we need to go back and read the procedures and the role and responsibilities of a board member. We just had that retreat. Dr. Frejo tried to help us with that, but apparently some of us don't get it, and we have got to get it. If not, we're going to keep spinning our wheels, and get nothing accomplished. And at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's not about any of you, it's about these kids that we're trying to serve.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Is there any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, that was not a threat. That was it. That was a fact. I mean, Tim and Hazel are not running again. We're going to have a new board. And they are going to care about the HR climate, I believe. There is a giant middle area in setting the direction of an organization between firing the superintendent and not ever expressing any sort of point of view. I'm not anywhere near either one of those. I am trying to make it clear what the expectations that are communicated to me by the public, who we all answer to, not each other, not some procedures. We answer to the public. And the public is very clear with me that they want an active board that sets expectations for behavior, that comments on those expectations when they're not met, that is unhappy when we lose a very competent person who is incredibly important in interfacing with our key people because we just didn't do the administrative work to keep her. And those are, I'm going to talk about those things over and over and over again. You can try to fire me if you want. I'm open to that, but you know, I'm not here to fire anybody. I'm not here to to even criticize anybody. What I am here to do is set expectations of what I think the public wants. That's who we answer to. And again, when I comment on a thing, it's to give my point of view on how we've acted. I know what my powers are. My powers are none. None of us have any power to speak of. The only power I have is in communicating with the public how the organization is functioning. And I am very, very liberal with my compliments as well, as I think people will attest. I'm just very, very direct in how I see things going. So and I make no apologies for that. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, look, I think obviously as a board, our responsibility is setting policy. So let's figure out what we can do to address these issues through policy. And you have a background in communications. You suggested that if we post the videos, that would be helpful, and I think that's a good suggestion. And Madam Superintendent, I think, agrees with that. So that's something we can do. Is there something we might address from a policy perspective as it relates to the HR issue that's of concern? If we could address it from that perspective, I think it's relevant here. Otherwise, it seems to me it's a personnel issue, and it should go to the superintendent. That's Mrs. Sellers?
Oh, well, I was just going to give everybody, Mr. Harris and I were in Tallahassee last week, and we met with lots of our legislators. You have to think about planting seeds and what you discuss. A lot of times you don't get to see what you want. The budgets are very different from the House to the Senate. Wendy's very hopeful that the House budget probably will suit us better this year than the Senate. The Senate budget, the bottom line is you'll have $45, and we can't say for us because it changes from district to district, but on the average, they want to give $45 less per pupil than we received last year, and it's going to be hard for us to take another hit. Oddly enough, they have the same pot of money, but the Senate wants to dictate where the money's spent, so ultimately it gives us less money to work with. But Wendy is pretty hopeful that maybe the House budget will get passed, and it's a little better. Never great, but they also have a pot of money, and they are trying to give us as big of amount of money as the pot will allow without raising taxes or finding new sources of revenue. I just wanted to pass everybody, Tim has this, but this is the paper, the FSBA. These are some of the bottom line things that as a state we can support. There are other things that each district goes in and talks with our legislators about. The only thing, one of the things that I emphasized is the teacher shortage and some issues, I think, maybe, that we really need, the state really needs to take a hard look at our teacher shortage, and we need help from the state in relieving that. They've got a rigorous testing system now for teachers that I believe is having a chilling effect on people entering education to begin with. You can't get a degree without passing these state tests now. So, and the state test, they've upped the level of rigor, and it's amazing in a field where fewer and fewer people are going, the state decides that they need to make it even more difficult to become a teacher. We talked about teacher evaluations, and and Mr. Harris may have more to add and other things that we specifically talked about. But I'm hoping that the House budget gets passed for us, because I really don't think we can do with less per pupil. When you look at our fund balance now, it's going to be hard to work with less per pupil. So, well, that was our trip. And if you have any questions on anything, you can ask me. But Mr. Harris may have other comments.
I thought that one of the most encouraging meetings that we had was with Representative Ben Aldridge. And he was very enthused to hear about the great progress that this district has made over the last 15 plus years in regard to career academies and workforce education, and helping kids make decisions about possible career options. what they want to go into, what they don't want to go into. And he has fervently committed, once the session is over, to meet back with Hazel and I and visit some schools and some of those academies.
And aren't we like the second in the nation? I mean, I know we went up and learned, because I went on the trip, we went up and learned from the Nashville School District, but I think then we went and, aren't we like one of the leaders in the nation when it comes to career technical education?
Yes, we are. We
Got an
just received a
award.
Magna Award
Right
in
now,
For that.
2010 and 2011 for having one of the best school
The best
districts with career
with
academies.
career
So
academies.
we've been doing this for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought we were recognized as one of the top in the nation. So.
Yeah, and there's no question, we have just remarkable, our career academies are just truly outstanding. I guess my frustration is, and I've shared this with our legislators, is that this focus on getting students college ready. So even to get through the career academies, they have to be college ready first. And that's my frustration.
That's not
No,
true.
That's absolutely
No.
not
No.
true.
No, you need to go to some locally. There's so many
But
that don't
they-
even, that aren't even on the college stream, because they can get
They're not
certification.
They're not required to maintain the same requirements for a diploma?
That's a state.
That's a
That's
state
not-
issue.
That's what I'm saying.
Not at
This,
all. That's nothing to do with us.
no, I know, I understand that, but I'm saying that the state requires our students to be college ready for the diploma, even to get through the career academies.
No, sir, Mr. Wilson.
No?
that-
No.
That's not true?
completely accurate, no, sir.
Okay.
There
So-
are different diploma options for students that prepare them for that. One of the messages that we've been sending out to the Kiwanis clubs, the chamber clubs, and the organizations is that we have made it a valiant effort to move our students toward becoming ready for life. And
Okay.
if that life experience means that the chosen field that they have a vested interest in requires college, then it's certainly our responsibility to have them go through a college prep track. If indeed it isn't, which is why we've become such a national leader in the career academies and the workforce development side, is that they don't have that intention, then the goal is to connect them through a career academy that then brings them into a cohort-based opportunity, lets them establish something that they find a true calling for. Attendance improves, discipline goes down, all of those measures that show success. And ultimately, that's how we end up with almost 5,000 industry certifications, because we know those kids aren't gonna go to college. So I have been on a track, as has the workforce office, that has said, you know, a decade ago, we have started removing that philosophy that all kids go to college. And we have done an extremely good job in preparing these kids for other options.
Well, thank you for correcting me, I appreciate that. I'd like to talk further and learn more about that. I guess I jumped to that conclusion incorrectly because of what happened at Roosevelt and our challenges that we faced there. So, yeah, and if we could sit down and talk, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Well, I mean,
Yes, sir.
I think, Len, what you may be getting at, I mean, unless things have changed significantly in the last year, 18 months, since I've talked to John Small about this, and I asked him, you know, the population served by the academies tends to be essentially a magnet school type population. It's I mean, that's what John said. I mean, specifically. I mean, now perhaps that's changed. Where so the question is not whether they're preparing kids for college or not preparing kids for college. The question is it preparing the right kids who need it the most? And I think where we have the people at Ridge and Travis would suggest that they've been shortchanged, I think, in trying to reach kids who don't fit into the academy model some. Again, this isn't really a criticism, it's just sort of an observation. There's only so much money to go around. But I think if we're gonna reach kids who are already not, part of the point of the academy is to reach kids who might not have a purpose in life, right? I mean, isn't that kind of the idea? I think it tends to reach the kids who already have that. So how do we get the kids who really need the help for preparation? And I'd love to see us pay a little more attention to Ridge and Travis if that's practical, or come up with something that replicates that. And, you know, sorry. Go ahead.
Ms. Sellers?
That's part of the Wall-to-Wall Academy's dream that we have. And in Bartow, I think you could see that in the Construction Academy and in Medical Academy. There are many kids that the the schools reach out to civic clubs to pay for these industry certifications because there's kids ready to take them and kids that pass them, but they can't pay for the exams. So we are reaching that, and that is the goal. And if you have wall-to-wall academies, that if you go to Nashville, you will see that you want every kid to be connected with something so that when they finish school, they have a means to be successful. And I understand a lot of our middle-class kids, because we have great academies, but we are reaching, many times at the board meetings, we bring in kids. You want to cry when they tell you, when a young man from Tenorock said, I'm not going to be like my dad, who had to work many, many hours to barely support the family, because now I'm going to be able to have a good job. So we are reaching them. We're not anywhere near. It takes partnerships and it takes money because these academies are expensive. But we're growing each and every year, and we are reaching a lot of those kids, and we're trying to. We haven't reached every kid yet, but it's certainly not meant to exclude the very people that we want to get.
Oh, no, I don't for a second say it's meant to.
No, but we're working on it.
Just the way it's sort of, the way incentives work sometimes.
But when we move to having, at Bartow's a perfect example, when you have enough academies that everybody has an opportunity to be in one, you see where you're meeting those needs, and you see the lives changed is amazing to me. Kids that wouldn't have had hope now have hope, and have, at high school level, they have matured so much. So we're on the right track, and we're growing at. If we grew any faster, we would not be putting out the quality that we're putting out. And so you have to be patient, because our academies are quality academies, and they are reaching some of those. And I understand the frustration that we're not reaching every kid this year, but
don't put on the brakes, Mr. Hutek.
He hasn't.
I think Mrs. Cunningham had something she wanted to offer.
No, I just wanted to make a comment. I would invite you to come. I mean, the most eye-opening place and event that I have ever been to related to academies, besides going to Nashville, was our We3 Expo in November. I've gone to every single one and tried to go to my schools and then other schools to kind of see what's going on, what the changes are, who's represented, and to me that really gives the clearest picture of where we stand with our academies, the diversity of the student population that are enrolled in those, and then to stand there and talk to either teachers or kids and say, tell me, not just tell me about the robot. I mean, what has this meant to you? What has this meant to your family? What do you want to do when you grow up? What did you want to do before you were in the academy versus what you're doing now? I just think that one-on-one with those kids, to me, has been totally enlightening. So, of course, we can always expand and do more, but what we've got in place now is truly phenomenal. And I invite you to go to the Expo in November to really get a feel. So.
Yeah, and I think the key is just meeting the kids where they are, right?
Yes.
Which is a little different than a college ready approach.
Yeah,
and Mr. Townsend, I interrupted you.
Well, just one last thing, and this will be, I don't want to spin this off into a whole other discussion, but sort of the question of skilled trades, plumbing, welding. I know Ridge has a really good welding program, or did. It's more, that's kind of what I'd be more interested in seeing more of. I don't think the academy, I know there's a construction academy, and there's culinary academy and things like that, but the focus on skilled trades, I think, is what kind of dovetails with what Lynn says, and I don't think any of this stuff is mutually exclusive. It's just priorities.
And if I could add, Mr. Townsend, the idea of the career academies somewhat resembling a magnet, as you referred. When those programs first started coming into play, and the model following that Ford Next Generation Learning Academy process, it almost appeared as if there were schools that were granted this, and the folks that know me when I do presentations call it the golden egg, right? So the golden egg is laid on this school, and all of a sudden, they reap the benefits.
Right.
One of the things that we've realized is, based on the Nashville model, is that we've got to go after all kids. So we've developed, in the last year and a half, we've developed a Workforce Alliance program that is now looking to figure out how to harvest the 600 or so businesses in Polk County that have a legitimate interest in what our schools do, and how they provide the supports as a group to all of our schools. So you don't have one particular school that's connected with one major business. Instead, you may have 15 or 20 businesses that are willing to support those types of programs across our district. That's huge. In the meantime, we've also pulled forward with identifying 5 priority areas in this county based on the stakeholders in the workforce. And those priority areas do include the construction industry. And we have recently convened a construction consortium where we have gone back now and met with Polk Builders Association, individual home builders, pulled all of them together and said, okay, now how do we develop the bridges within multiple high schools to add on the programs that you're looking for while we solidify a bridge directly into the post-secondary options. So we've done that now with construction, aviation, manufacturing, education we're creating as well, and public service, because those seem to be some of the greatest needs in our community. So the ball is rolling at about Mach 2, and I've got a tremendous staff right now that is up to here with initiatives to assure that what Mr. Wilson is saying is not what we want.
Yeah, I mean, the key is we have to meet them where they are. That's the key to making it work. Mrs. Cunningham, I think.
Real quick, and just from an economic development standpoint, because we as a county, you know, want to continue to bring industry and new jobs to our county. And as an example, a few years back, when Etong came to town up in Haines City, they needed masons, but they needed masons who were trained to use their particular lightweight concrete, a concrete block that you could basically hold in your hand like this. And we didn't have any such program. So we got together with Ridge Career Center there and said, hey, can you actually work with the company from an economic development standpoint and create a program? So that's the other piece that I think most people don't even realize that they do, but they actually develop specific programs to train our local masons how to utilize, in that case, something that had never been done before in the United States. So just, it's amazing what those
Ms. Reynolds?
I just wanted to add to, within resembling magnet schools, I think historically 5 to 10 years ago, mainly because I know students who did it, you went to an academy because you were zoned Lake Region and wanted to go to Winter Haven. I mean, I know that's what my best friend did, that's what guidance counselors would say. You know, if you want to go to this school, if you go to an academy, then they have to let you go to this school. So, but as school choice has gotten easier, I think that has kind of resolved itself in the past few years, that the academies are truly the students who are in the academy because that's where they want to be, not because they feel like they have to come and take culinary classes for 3 years so that they can go to the school that they want to go to, if that makes sense.
Mr. Harris?
One other item I'd like to share with the board. Yesterday I attended for Sarah the Central Florida Public School Boards Coalition meeting, and just wanted to report back just briefly. Senate Bill 188. That is a bill that could cost this district a lot of money, along with all the other districts in the state, and that is decreasing the 2-mile limit down to 1.5 miles for bus transportation, and also including in that bill is the change in what is the definition of a very risky location, so that kids literally could be picked up across the street and transported. Right now it's a 6-lane highway and a 50-mile speed limit. The proposal is to reduce that to 4 lanes or wider and a 45-mile speed limit. So between those two, we're talking over $150 million statewide increase in cost, with 2/3 of that expected to be borne by the local districts. We're one of the biggest districts in the state geographically, and would probably hurt us more than it would say a very concentrated district like Pinellas. So that is one effort that is being worked on at the Senate level. Wendy has come out and spoken against that on our behalf. But that was one of the things that was mentioned yesterday at the coalition meeting, so that the other 13 districts in the coalition will be aware of that. We did hear from Representative Renee Palencia, a Republican and former 15-year history teacher in Orange County. And he reminds me somewhat of some of our former local delegates who spoke out from their heart and not necessarily what leadership in the legislature wanted them to say. He is a man who is very independent and doesn't mind telling the leadership in Tallahassee what he thinks should be done. And one of the comments that he, I spoke with him briefly outside, shared with me, as soon as he walked out of the room, he got a call from a fellow representative who was wringing his hands about procedural matters. This gentleman had introduced a bill, he had decided to vote against a particular bill and was asked, well, did you go speak to the sponsor of the bill? He said, no, I didn't know I needed to. So he goes and speaks to the sponsor of the bill. The sponsor of the bill says, well, did you go speak to the Speaker of the House, tell him you weren't going to sponsor the bill? He said, no, I didn't know I needed to. He voted against the bill. Every one of the bills that he was proposing were removed from the document. I don't see that as a way to advance the needs of the citizens of Florida when leadership expects you to tell them in advance what your position is going to be. And it's certainly not anything I would promote and encourage. And I respect Representative Palencia for being one of those who has the courage to speak up against his own party's leadership. Respect him for that. But watch SB 188. That Senate bill apparently is moving forward. And if it gets passed, that's some more general fund revenue that we will have to dip into to fund increased transportation. Just want to make you aware of that.
Ms. Sellers?
On that bill, where are they getting the money for the 1/3 that they will fund? Because they never fund fully transportation, but they do.
Well, the staff
fund
analysis indicates about $58 million would probably come from the state and about $100 million from the local school districts.
Out of our general revenue.
And Gary Farmer, a Broward County Democrat, said we don't want to see other programs suffer. Well, you got to take the money from somewhere, and Greg Stubbe, he's a Sarasota Republican, he's the sponsor of the bill, and he said, well, he would work with others to look for funding, but the effort is not going to die. He's not going to let it die. He's going to push until it gets passed. I guess the issue is just going to be a matter of who's going to pay for it.
Right. Yeah, that was the point I wanted to make. I mean, we've got a number of situations in the county right now. Like there's one where where kids at Parker Street Ministries in the dark have to essentially walk to Philip O'Brien because of the 2-mile rule. And you know, we've been trying to think about ways to address that. I would welcome SB 188 if it was funded. I guess, and I guess that really is the question. It's meeting a real need, but it's not paying for the need, and that's ultimately what we have to deal with. And I just think you look at the point of dealing with those people up there. There's not any point in it. I mean, they're not going to listen. They're not. I mean, they're the only way to change this is all the districts kind of rise up as one and act as a voting bloc to change the legislature. So anyway, for what it's worth.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I had a couple of items.
Sure.
I wasn't able to make the last board meeting work session. I just wanted to request in the future when I call in advance if it can be announced, and that should not just be for me, but for any board member when they're not present, that they're not going to be in either the work session or in the board meeting. So I would appreciate that. It's my understanding that there was discussion about concurrency, and that we're going to be having a workshop soon to see where we are on that. So
yes.
So I wanted to know, have we set a date on that? I think it's very important that we are all informed on where we are on concurrency. and how that's going to impact the sales tax referendum and overall the needs of our schools. So do we have a date for that yet?
No date set yet, but I will get a date to the board as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I had one other request.
I'm sorry, were you finished, Mrs. Fields? You
Yes,
said
sir.
you had a couple of.
Yes, sir.
For our insurance, we haven't had an update on how our insurance plan is doing. I know last year we voted to, even though the state wants us to have 60 days, we voted to have 45 days. But I know that we've been eating days, so I don't know how those days could stop being eaten away. So if we could have an update on where we are with our insurance plan and how it's faring.
Yes.
I was invited to serve on a regional task force. Congressman Soto invited me to Osceola County to serve on this task force related to Puerto Rican arrivals in Central Florida. Ms. Reynolds was there, and Juan Seda
Yes, that's correct.
represented the district as well. And it was interesting. They asked the school board members what can we do to help you? And my first response was, well, we need money for teachers who can assist those students with the language barrier, special skills, teachers with special skills. We need money for facilities. So we talked about the more obvious things, and then I suggested that it would be very helpful if the Department of Education would take the handcuffs off of us and let us do what we do best, and that is manage our school district. What was interesting about that, and quite telling, was that was not an issue until I brought it up, and then it seemed to be an issue with all the school board members. So I thought that was quite telling, and there were some things that came out of that. Congressman Soto has promised to reach out to our state legislators to see what he can do in ensuring that our required local effort does not decrease each year. Ultimately, it's maintain a level status, but even though property values are going up. So he's pledged to do what he can to make sure that doesn't happen, so that we get an increase as property taxes go up. And then also he's going to try, he said he'd do his best to get us $1.2 billion from the federal government. Now that's not for Polk County, but for the state of Florida, so for capital needs. So we'll see. Those were the promises he made as part of that task force, and we'll see how that goes. And Ms. Reynolds, would you like to add anything to that?
I don't think so, that pretty much covers it.
Just thank you for that.
Yeah.
Pressure is what we're gonna have to do in every setting all the time if we want anything to change.
Well, obviously he's with the federal government, and,
Right,
and he doesn't address, but there were some state legislators there, and they heard that message, and they heard it loud and clear from all the board members. So it was telling. Any other comments from board members? So I think Mr. Bridges has an update for us on the contracts.
Yes, sir, and I'd hope to have materials for you for today. We've got a stack of contracts that have come in from other districts and some more coming. I would like to have them tabulated and create tables for you so that you can disaggregate all the information in them. And I will plan to have those for you in advance of the next meeting so that you can look at it before we meet.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
And I'll
Bridges.
meet with Ms. Matthews to make sure that we've got all of the information that has come in from the auditors as well.
And as I understand it, it's a little more difficult on the audit side because not all school districts have the same structure that we do, which is rather surprising to me, given that you would expect an internal auditor to report to a board, and apparently that's not the case in most districts. So those contracts, I understand, are a little more difficult to get.
That's correct. We've gotten probably about 15 responses from other districts,
okay.
But only 2 have a unique contract. So I have copies of those contracts, but you're right in that a lot of the districts are not set up. Our professional standards, say that we should, the internal audit function should report directly to the board, but that's not the case in a lot of other districts. And in a lot of other districts, that function is limited to only the school audits, where here we do much more than just the school audits, and we're organized independently so that our outside auditors can rely on our work and so forth. So, yeah, it's been a challenge to get comparable contracts, but I have a couple from the larger districts.
Okay. Will you make those available to us, or are you going to do that?
Yes, we'll tabulate.
Okay.
We'll attach the copies of the actual contracts, but we'll also create tables that show you district by district what the essential terms are. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you
But
so
we'll have
much.
those to you in advance so that you won't be receiving it at the work session.
Thank you. So, Madam Superintendent, would you like to introduce the next item, please?
I will. The next item that we have for you coming before you in discussion will be the charter contract renewals, and Ms. Brady, she's here to bring those forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So this morning I'm bringing before you two schools that have gone through a very rigorous renewal process. All of you should have seen the attachments in the agenda. One of them included a renewal application. It's fairly extensive. It takes a good amount of time. We actually asked them to start preparing that document about a year in advance before their contract expires. I'm going to walk you through the process of a renewal for those of you who haven't done this with us before. So the very first thing that happens is the school actually receives a template from the district that has been put together over the years, and it requires them to include information like student performance, mission and vision, goals that they have had for the school, how they've met those goals in the last 5 years or over the course of their contract. Then that information is then sent to the district office, and there is a charter review team that actually looks at that application. The review team looks very much like the application review team, and I'll share with you who those members are. Every person on that review team takes a good amount of time to review the application. And then there is a site visit that usually lasts about 4 or 5 hours, and we go to the campus and we have a prepared document that prepares the school in advance to have documents available for us to look at. We visit classrooms, we speak to teachers, we speak to students, we talk to board members, usually the board chair, and administrators. Then the charter review team, we take everything that we've looked at through the site visit and also through the application, and we put it all together into a site finding document, which you also have attached to your agenda. And it will have a cover page that sort of has background and some upfront information about the school. And then behind those pages, it will disclose some of the strengths and weaknesses that we found during our visit. We give recommendations to the school. District staff will also at certain times, depending on what it is that maybe we've witnessed it or that we've seen, we'll actually go back and visit the school a second time, or visit with administrators a second time, or even with teachers a second time, just to provide additional support and recommendations for whatever it is that we feel like there may have been a need. Then we come before you, and I bring before you the recommendation to the superintendent as far as their renewal. So today, what today is it's just a presentation of their renewal contract, or their renewal application, our recommendation for the contract term. Then you'll vote on whether or not, during the next board meeting, whether or not we can go forward and actually negotiate a new contract with the school. So that's what today's work session is, that's what the next board meeting would be. And then the following work session would be, I would bring forward the new contract, we would discuss the terms that have changed from the old contract to the new, and then we would bring it before the board for a vote after that. The renewal team is made up of a wide variety of folks across the district. We make sure that we have someone, an expert, to represent every area that we're going to look at the school. So of course we have charter office staff. We have the senior director for K-12 curriculum, which is Ann Everett. We have the senior director of budget, which is Jason Pitts. Oftentimes Alain Munoz, who is also a specialist, he works with us too. He's the budget analyst. We have the ESOL director, who is Juan Seda, who accompanies us. Director of Recruitment, Educator Quality, that's from HR, and that is Anissa Wilfalk, and she goes in and she is the fine-tooth comb girl through HR documentation. So there's no stone left unturned when she's in there. And everyone, I should say that about every single person on this list. Everybody does a great job. We have a curriculum specialist that is represented, and it's usually in the area of science. And we have Carrie Welcome, who accompanies us. Sometimes we'll call other folks from other areas as well. And then the Assistant Superintendent of Learning Support, Dr. Kim Steinke, who is behind me, who also does a great job in really digging into student learning support, which is also ESE. So when we go in and we're looking at renewing a contract with a charter school, we want to make sure that there are 3 things that are evident. One is there is the school and academic success. We want to make sure that there's progress being made every year, that students are performing successfully. We also look at, is the school a viable organization, and what we look for there are their finances. Are they in good shape financially? What does their governing board look like? Have they gone through certification? Are they in compliance as far as the governing board? And then lastly, has the school remained faithful to the terms of its charter? In cases of, like for instance, Discovery, who's been around for a long time, and I'll share with you how long they've been open, schools that have been open for longer than 15 years, sometimes there's a natural evolution in a program because kids change, needs change, programs need to change with the kids. So sometimes that initial contract, or the contract that was, because a lot of our contracts are 15 years old, they have morphed a bit. And so when we say has the school remained faithful to the terms of its charter, we mean in compliance. So sometimes curriculum has changed, sometimes reading curriculum has changed, sometimes math programs have changed, but that's because it's been based on the students' needs, okay? Just very quickly for your information, Florida statute does give us cause for non-renewal or termination of a charter. And there are 4 reasons. One is failure to participate in the state's education accountability system. This is an online requirement that all of our charter schools are required to go onto FLDOE every year, and they do this accountability report. And all of our schools, every single one, all 27, are always in compliance every year. For those of you who don't know or don't recall, last year we installed an online tool called Charter Tools, which has made monitoring compliance so much easier for the charter office. If you know, there are only 3 of us. I have a secretary and I have a specialist who works with me. And so taking care of 27 schools, a lot of times the documentation that has to be sent to my office is a monthly thing. So when you get 27 emails, as you well know, and it's all documentation, and then the next day there's something else that needs to be sent, it just gets lost in the shuffle. So now we have a tool that actually acts as a dashboard, and so our schools, they will put their information in on their side. It doesn't go to email ever. It's flagged green. It means they're in compliance. We have somebody, and it's district staff, has access to the tool. They go in, like for finance, they go in and they can look at finance through the dashboard. So it just makes our job a lot easier, so we can stay in compliance as a district as well when we're monitoring our charter schools. So number 1 is fairly easy for us to monitor because it's part of our charter tools. They can check the box there. Then number 2, failure to meet generally accepted standards of fiscal management. We understand what that is. If the school is not in good standing financially, then obviously that's a good reason to close the school. Violation of law, that would be something that would be reported to us, sometimes reported at the state level and then brought down to us. And I will say that neither of the schools that are being brought forward today are in violation of the law. And then number 4, other good cause shown. That is such a gray statement. I don't think we've ever closed a school on other good cause. I may be wrong. This is year 4 for me. But historically, I believe that anytime we've closed a school, it has been based on some of the other reasons, but not that one. So I'm not sure if we would invoke that or what that would look like because I'm not experienced in that area. But if that ever comes up, I will make sure that I will get with Wes and we'll talk about it. He'll let me know. So the first school is Discovery Academy of Lake Alfred. Just some background about the school. We also affectionately refer to it as DALA. It opened in 2001, so it has been around for a long time. It currently has a 9-year contract that is expected to expire June 30th of 2018. District staff conducted our site visit on December the 4th. Some school demographics. Discovery Academy is a Title I school that serves 941 6th through 8th grade students. Discovery Academy's enrollment is 58% minority students and 77% economically disadvantaged students. 17% of the student population is ESE and 9% is ELL.
Can I,
Yes.
of that ESE, what percentage is gifted?
I believe if you look at the attachment,
Yeah, I couldn't get it to open, I'm sorry.
okay, so it's on the second page.
Okay, not open, second.
You will see, their breakdown for the special ed, demographic. So you'll see that, and I don't see, there's not a gifted, but 78% of the students, they receive inclusion, and then it lists out the specific types of disabilities. 504s are 81 students, and it lists the disabilities, so it's all broken out here, but there is not a gifted.
Is that something that's possible to get in the
Sure.
future? What's the high,
Absolutely
what's
is.
the lower?
8%. I do have them in the peanut gallery. I have Kevin Warren, who is the principal of Discovery Academy, and then Kara Fox, who is the director of the academy.
So you're saying 9% is ESE with the EIPs?
9%
Or
is
504s?
ELL, so that's the English language learner.
No, but you said 8% gifted, so if it's some type, or,
I can get that broken out.
Yeah,
17, what you're saying,
17%. And the numbers may not add up directly because you may have students who are gifted and still have an IEP.
That's true. What would you like?
Just the different, what if they're the gifted high end or?
Would you like me to get student number specific?
Percentage or number specific, but it doesn't necessarily have to be for this one, but just in the future when
Sure.
we're doing these.
we did
would
that,
be really
we did that
great.
view for Bach, back when we had a view of overall, and what was gifted to be a helpful thing to
Just so
know.
we can see what the high end is.
Yes, please. Dr. Stanky is going to get that right now.
Thank you.
So I'll continue while she does that. So our student performance for the last 5 years has been very well for middle school, 940 plus students. They have been consistent in their school grade, and they have consistently tested 99 or above % of all of their students. If you look at their FSA data for reading, you can see that they have again remained fairly consistent in their learning gains, and also the percentage of students who have scored a satisfactory grade or higher. The asterisk, if you can't see at the very bottom, there were no gains reported because those were our baseline years from when we went from FCAT to FSA. The next slide shows the math FSA data, and again, we see we see consistency across the board as far as math scores higher than a 3 in both FCAT and FSA. We also see significant learning gains last year in math from 56 to 58. And then in math learning gains for the lowest 25%, we do see a drop. We'll talk about that. For the next section is just sort of the catch-all section. So we have writing in there, which is now included in the ELA FSA score. We have science, learning gains, or the students who have scored a satisfactory score or higher is relatively high here, 57% for last year. Social studies has been consistently high, and then middle school acceleration points, the school has also received 50% or more. So So during our site visit, we always look at, we call them wows and grows. And so these were our wows. If you've ever visited Discovery Academy, something you should also probably know about the school, it was a conversion school, so at one time it was a district school. The campus is beautiful. It is very well kept. The landscaping is beautiful. And that's always something, when there's no trash on the ground, you know, or in the trees and in the shrubs, and when you see kids actually picking up trash, that is really impressive. And so we were impressed by that. The other thing that was sort of interesting is the way they've set their campus. They call their buildings houses, not buildings. And so every child goes to a certain house. And then their substitutes are not substitutes, they're guest teachers. And so we thought that was neat too, because the students actually refer to them as, we have a guest teacher today. We don't, because I had no idea what they were talking about. And so I thought that really sets a tone for, you know, instead of saying we have a sub today, you know, it's more, we have a guest teacher today, and this teacher is coming forward and they're going to present. And it just, the dynamic, the sense of respect was there, and so that was neat. The students were well behaved when we were there and attentive, and you know, that sometimes happens anyway. Another thing, that it's a huge campus and it's wide open in the middle. And so some of the things that we were talking about, we couldn't wait for classes to change, because if you've ever been in a middle school of almost 1,000 kids and you've watched classes change, it's like everybody just finds a hiding place. But what was neat is the teachers actually walk out of their classrooms and they form a corral. And the kids have to sort of walk through this corral of teachers. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to do, because it keeps the kids from hitting each other, touching each other. They, you know, there's teachers that are right there monitoring the behavior as they go, because they're 8th graders. It doesn't matter if it's a charter school, they're still, you know, 6th, 7th, 8th graders. They hit, they push, they spit. I taught 8th grade for years and years and years, and that's my favorite group of kids in the whole wide world. So, but they smell funny too, so. The mission and vision was posted in every classroom, and I thought that was important, you know, so that every student has an understanding of what their school's mission and vision is. Some of the classrooms, we went into the intensive reading classes. That's sort of where we wanted to go into some of those classes, and the teachers have created this environment where some of them had the pink rock salt lamps, and you're supposed to create this area of calm, and that was and some of them had the oils, which, you know, the lavender or whatever, that just made everything calm. So you just walked in there and everybody was reading and it was calm, and it just felt good to be in an intensive reading class. And if you've ever walked into one, you know, sometimes they're just hard, you know, and so it was really, and they're very, very small too, so there was a lot of one-on-one. The other thing was the security of the campus. It is all fenced, and one of the things that I would say, because our district schools are required to have like that lock all the way around, and it's almost like, you know, trying to get into Fort Knox when I visit some of our district schools. I'm like, I really belong here. Because we're so, you know, and that's really good. But some of our charter schools don't have that same type of safety. Discovery really worked hard on creating that same type of safety that we have in our district schools. With the fence all the way around, you can only get in one way, and also every single classroom was locked. We know that that's just something you're supposed to have. We feel like it's a natural thing, but again, we have visited some other schools, and I've just walked into buildings, and so. And those are things that we've called to their attention for safety-wise. But Discovery keeps everything is a key, so that was good. Their finance, Jason and Align take a good amount of time and sit down with their finance folks, and they interrogate them, ask them questions about procedures in the front office, who's handling cash, how is that cash being registered, where is it being kept. So they had great internal controls, they got great thumbs up, they said the financial review was fantastic, and then overall their financial stability as far as a school is very good. we were able to talk to the board chair, and the board chair feels like she is very in the know of what happens at the school. She is often copied on, she has very transparent position there. She's often copied on parents' emails. Parents will, will email her. And then also she has, whenever there are board meetings, Mr. Warren always provides a report about the school, and she's able to ask for additional information. So she feels like there's a very good partnership between the board and between the administration of the school. HR, all of the records were excellent. I think Anissa went on and on and on about how perhaps they need to have a training for other charter schools as far as how they keep their HR documentation, because it was so well organized, and so they did a fabulous job there. As far as recommendations, there were some things when we walked into some classrooms where we felt like there should maybe be some more rigor behind some of the classes that the students were taking. There should have been more student autonomy in asking questions and so forth. We basically did a curriculum walkthrough. So when we walk through, I mean, Ann does this, Ann Everett does this a lot, and then also our curriculum specialist, they walk through all of our schools. And so they were able to provide probably the same feedback that they would provide at any school. And so we picked a couple of teachers and just walked in, sat in a couple of classrooms, and there were some things, but they weren't anything that we felt like were completely egregious, but definitely had, and then also while we're there, when we make recommendations, we don't make the recommendation and then just say, peace out. We say, if there is anything else that we can do for you, if there's anything that we can help you to look at, or if there's another area that you want to help us, because we have the experts, we have access to the experts. These are all our kids, these are all Polk County kids. So whatever it is that you need as far as support, we always offer that. In finance, there was a recommendation that perhaps the school look into the armored car service and picking up the cash. It just seemed like a safer way to handle that instead of sending your school secretary down to the bank. And so that was one of the recommendations that was made. And then also there is no established policy as far as a fund balance like we have. And so that was also recommended to their board chair that perhaps they put that into place. In HR, yes.
What is cognitive struggle a euphemism for?
It's when it's the questioning, the questioning, instead of the teacher just giving the information, just giving the.
That's fine.
Yes, the teacher will ask the child, trying to pull instead of push.
Sort of a Socratic type
yes.
thing. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it leaves scars.
Yes.
That's that whole Socratic thing.
It's very good for teachers and students. And then HR, there were just some things that that we do as a district, and that's district policy, that we felt like would benefit them if they also did it for audit purposes, that they followed some of the same things that we did. And so, but none of these things were outside of what they're supposed to do. Did you have that number? Oh, okay. Okay. So the charter review team recommends renewing Discovery Academy's contract for 15 years. The new contract term would begin July 1, 2018 and would extend through June 30, 2033. So they are finishing the 15-year, we're recommending a 15-year. And this then will, what will go to vote next board meeting, just to clarify again, is just simply that we are allowed to go ahead and pursue new contract with the school. The next school that that's up for renew is Polk State College Lakeland Gateway High School. It is a mouthful. So we affectionately refer to it as Gateway. Gateway High School opened in 2013, so it's a relatively new school. It's sort of a baby school. They opened at first with a 3-year contract, and then they asked for a modification to that contract, and we extended it for an additional 2 years because we really needed more data. This school opened as an alternative school, and so there was there's really not anything to measure in the first 3 years, so we needed to sort of give 2 more years to see how they were doing. So that was given to them the year 2 years ago, and so now we are expiring June 30, 2018. We conducted our site visit on December the 11th. So Gateway was actually established to replicate the Gateway to College National Network, which is a national network that aspires to become a program where students who have fallen outside of their cohort or students who have struggled and just need that extra push, that they be a part of this program so that they would also be introduced to college credit along the way. And so they, this network is also recognized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This school has received a grant through the Gateway to College National Network and is nationally recognized. Gateway High School is considered an alternative program, and it receives a SIR rather than a school grade. So that's a school improvement rating rather than a school grade, okay? The mission of Polk State, or Gateway, is to provide an academic charter alternative for students who have at least 10 high school credits and who are not older than 21. So students who can attend this school are anywhere between the ages of 16 and 21. Okay. Gateway now serves 200 students. Gateway's enrollment is 63% minority students. So their SIR rating, they didn't receive a SIR rating in the first year that they were open. This is their 5th year that they're opened. They didn't receive one in their first year because you don't receive a grade or a rating. In the second year, there weren't enough students who actually tested for there even to be a SIR rating. And then 15-16, they received a maintaining rating, and then last year they received a commendable. Okay. Their graduation rate is currently at 78%. Their at-risk graduation rate is 77%, and their dropout rate as of last year is 2%. Doing a very good job. Some other areas that I thought you might be interested in seeing, that they do take the U.S. History EOC. You see a decrease in the student performance here from a 68% last year to 15%. When we asked about those numbers, there was a significant, there was a teacher who unfortunately during the school year found out that she had an illness that was pretty significant, and it took its toll on not only her but also her class. The teacher there is now a new teacher in that class, so we do anticipate that perhaps this year those numbers will go up exponentially. But we'll be looking at that. That's what the asterisk is for. For this number of students for last year who scored a satisfactory percentage or higher for PERT writing, or the SAT concordance score, was 79%. For those, that was for reading and writing. And for math for the PERT or for the SAT concordance score for PERT, the students, there were 73% who scored satisfactory or higher. And then for those students who completed at least one dual enrollment course prior to graduation, there were 96% last year. And I just, as a matter of reference, I wanted to let you know that %85 of them graduated with at least 9 credit hours, college credits. Yes, ma'am.
How many, because I know at least of one that actually got their AA degree, how many actually get an AA degree? Are there, I know that's not their real goal,
Right.
but I just wondered
I
if
don't
there were
have-
more than the one that I knew about.
Right, and there are a few, and so I can get that number for you as well. I don't have that
And
in front of me. I do have it, but I don't.
other than the history, it seemed like they made a real leap this year in performance. Is that what, would that be your
Yes.
evaluation of them
Yes.
as well?
The school strength, obviously it's a unique concept. So these are kids who otherwise would never see the inside of a college ever, because they probably have felt like they aren't able to do that because they were maybe considering dropping out, or they have dropped out and they've come back to a school. There is a seamless integration between the actual Gateway High School and Polk State College. The students have access to all of the college resources, which is phenomenal. The percentage of students, and again, that's the 85% of students that graduate with college credits, and that's 85 of them graduate last year with 9 or more, which I felt like was significant. There's a mentor student program. The school has, the principal included all of the teachers. They have grouped themselves with 25 students, and they have become mentors, and they stick with those students through the entire program, and they make sure that they're staying on track, and they keep them moving forward. As far as ESE, they do offer programs for students who do have unique needs based on personal situations. They allow, they work very closely with the college itself, and they do have ESE students do have an opportunity to succeed here as well. Their finance fund balance is robust. It's greater than 40%. That's significant.
40%?
Yeah, 40%.
Can they give
But
some of
this
it
is-
back?
Really?
Yeah.
Are there services they're not delivering as a result of that?
I don't
It
know.
sounds like to me they're.
I mean, I think that's a good, I think that's actually a really good question, yeah. That's too high.
Well, I can certainly ask that question. So.
I'm sure they're getting much assistance from the college.
Right, exactly.
But I'm wondering if they'd be willing to provide us with a report of some sort.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we have those reports.
Okay.
And so our finance department gets them monthly. We have a monthly finance report, so, and it's very detailed. So that's not a difficult thing to pull at all.
And they only serve 11th and 12th grade.
That's correct.
Okay.
I think we
only
would. Would we like to see that as a board?
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I
Make sure we
both
put
just like to,
Sure.
there's probably a simple explanation for that, would be
Sure.
my guess, but it'd be good to hear it.
Okay.
There's probably not a lot of electives, I think,
Yeah,
is
that's
what we were
what,
saying.
that there's no music or
Purely
art
Right.
or athletics,
academics.
the things that cost a lot.
Tend
And
to-
I can also find out when that was, I can also find out when that fund balance, if the fund balance was pulled on that day, you know, versus the end of the school year. And so I'll double check with that. This would be a comment that came from finance.
It's in here. Whatever dates it was submitted.
What? Oh, it's end of the year?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mr. Barnes, I was just kidding about getting it back.
Dr. Barnes is he's in the audience as well. Dr. Barnes is the principal of Gateway. He's taking notes too. We did have an opportunity to speak to board members. I don't know if you know this or not, but Gateway, even though it's a charter school, their board members are the identical board members of Polk State College, who are appointed by the governor. And so there is some very strict, I mean, their governance is very robust. And so, and they're very much an active part of Gateway, just like they're an active part of Polk State Collegiate and also Chain of Lakes Collegiate. So they all serve over those schools as well. The board, Dr. Barnes does communicate with the board every month about the school, about the finances of the school, student performance, so forth, just as any one of our schools would deliver that information to us. The principal is always part of the strategic plan. It doesn't necessarily involve the board, but the board does see the goals through the accountability plan that's submitted to the board every year. There's a very active student advisory council that the principal is very much a part of. I think if you watch Corey at a graduation, he can barely get through it half the time. He's very involved with his students, and he's very connected with his students. He really goes the extra mile. When the kids need the help, Dr. Barnes is the one who's trying to give them the extra help, so he does a fantastic job. some of the recommendations that we made, there were some things, when we went in, we asked them to maybe consider completing the free and reduced lunch form. They don't do that, they don't participate in the federal lunch program because the college provides them lunch. And so the kids fill out forms that is provided by the college, and then the college determines the free and reduced lunch. So when you look at the state reporting of free and reduced lunch for this school, it's 7%. But when you call and you ask for the free and reduced lunch forms that were turned in this year and how many kids are being served by Polk State College through their program, it's 41%. So it's a significant difference, and so that was one of the things we said, well, really so that we can gauge how many kids are falling into this category, because it's hard to find out what the economically disadvantaged group looks like there for that, because that's how we basically get our numbers. And so that we asked them to maybe upfront try to figure that out so that we would have access to that information. We also asked them to just take a part and inquire when there are training sessions especially from information services. They run their schedule on a 4x4 schedule, which is very different from all of our other schools. And so there is an amount of rigor behind scheduling their students and making sure everyone is scheduled properly that falls outside of what a traditionally scheduled classes look like. And so again, they're relatively new to the program, and so because now things are changing with our new tools that are being introduced, like Focus, we've asked that going forward they stay very engaged in those trainings, especially because they have such a unique scheduling process. Also, we asked them to implement a process and procedures to ensure appropriate course placement. So again, it's a relatively small school, but we wanted to make sure that students are being scheduled properly in the classes that they would need to be in order to graduate on time. And so we just asked for them to just sort of do the same. We have a particular procedure that we use. Ann Everett was able to assist Dr. Barnes and Dr. Downing, who is the assistant principal there, in putting together a very similar process, also with the provost, with Stephen Hull. And so we've met several times just to help them put together processes and procedures that will ensure that their students are getting what they need. We also recommended that as they continue to grow, that they consider their staffing and the number of students that they have assigned to each staff member in the mentoring program, because 25 students is a lot of kids per staff member. And so those are staff members that are staffed by Gateway, not necessarily Polk State College. And so we just wanted to make sure that as the school grows, that mentorship was going to grow with them. There were some classes that we walked into, and we just felt like the rigor could have been upped a little bit. They are on a college campus. We know that they struggle in some areas, but just ramp it up a notch and make sure that the kids who are in 11th and 12th grade classes are truly getting the rigor of an 11th and 12th grade class. The ESE, we recommended that as they grow, because they will receive more students with IEPs and 504 plans, this type of school really attracts those types of students, because this is they get the extra support that they need. And so we just really wanted them to make sure that they were very deliberate in their planning and going forward and how they were going to serve those students going forward. We feel like we've had some good discussions with them as far as that is concerned too. Our renewal recommendation, we voted to recommend renewing Polk State Lakeland Gateway High School's contract for 5 more years. And we recommended 5 years, because we really would like to see them, we would like to see where they are again in 5 years. This program is a very unique program. It's a program that again is, you know, it is recognized under the Gateway to College organization, and so we want to make sure that that's exactly where they're headed. Now, I will say that contract term is negotiable, and it's negotiable with the board as well. So this is what we're recommending, simply so that we can go back through this process again in 5 years and just see where they are. And they do receive a SIR rating, so again, that just gave us, we just felt like that was more, it gave us a better idea of where they are with the program, yes.
Have they requested a longer contract?
They requested 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
Ms.
Yes,
Fields?
ma'am.
I have a question on the demographics and on students leaving for both places. Is there any information in here, I didn't see anything, that would show us why the students are leaving and where they're going?
I thought that question might come up. And I thought for Discovery specifically, because there were such a large number of students. And so I asked the school to provide me a list of every student that left last year and why they left. And so of that list, it's broken up into several categories, but 12 of those students were accepted into our School of the Arts program, whether Davenport or Jewett or Daniel Jenkins. And so because they were accepted, they left the school and went there. They had 3 students go to private school, 11 went to homeschooling or virtual, 19 moved out of the district altogether or moved out of the state. There were transportation issues with 7 kids. These kids were from Crystal Lake, Sleepy Hill, Lake Gibson. That's pretty far to go to Discovery. And then there were 36 students who were dismissed, and those students had been on behavior probation, and as a result of them breaking up probation, they were dismissed from the school. There were 25 students who just withdrew because the parents wanted them to leave the school.
25 what now?
25 that withdrew due to family choice.
So we're looking at 61 that are the not a fit general category. So picking up on that, I think.
Finished.
Sorry.
Thank you. Of those 36 and 25, they went back to their home school? And that's still out. Is it specific schools that they went back to? Is it more than others? If my question is clear.
The kids who left due to a family choice, those 25, I see Westwood most. Westwood, Stanball, Citrus Ridge, Adair, Denison, Boone, Citrus Ridge.
Can you provide us with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you for having that information.
Okay.
And
I
then
appreciate
same thing for the,
Yeah, I can get that. I didn't.
right, it's not as significant, but still, I would still be interested.
Sure.
For this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend, then I think that's Ms. Sellers. Ms. Sellers and then Mr. Townsend.
Okay.
I'm trying to switch where it went.
Okay, me first.
Yes, ma'am.
I
Raise
will-
your hand.
The Gateway, because it's Gateway to College, and I just wondered, do they follow the kids to see how many
Yes.
graduate from Polk State? I'm assuming many of them stay there. You can get a 2-year or 4-year degree because they've been in now 5 years, so they should have some at least with the AA.
Yes, ma'am. In the attachment that you have, their application that they submitted to us, it has all that information in it. If you look in the, so the application is very detailed, especially for Gateway. It breaks it down all the way to subgroups, demographic subgroups, how many go on to college, how many have committed themselves to go to college but don't go to college. It's a lot of information, but you can find it in that document.
Okay, Mr. Townsend?
Yeah, this isn't really even a question for Melissa. Now that we've made, last year in January, I believe there were a dozen kids from Discovery who went back to Lake Alfred Adair when Lake Alfred Adair was its, was a zone school. Now that it's not a zone school, what's the nearest zone school to what becomes the home school for, if you're zoned for what used to be Lake Alfred Adair, where do you go now if you're in Discovery and you leave? Anybody know that?
I believe it's Bob that they were full at the beginning of the school year.
Yeah, I believe it. I do believe it's gonna be STEM, Mom.
But I think
Because if you're-
they were at capacity the first
But what
week
you're
of
saying is
school,
going
so
back
I don't know if
to-
they still are
Is that your point, is going back to one of the schools that are?
Well,
in question?
I just think having two choice schools sitting right next to each other complicates things for a lot of kids, especially if one is inclined to turn over 7% of its population, either through dismissal or not being a fit, for what it's worth. So.
Oh, any other questions? Madam Superintendent, could we take a short break? Or,
Dr. Sankey has his numbers for the gifted, like
Okay.
the gifted numbers.
Oh, okay.
Discovery.
Their ESC population is at about 16.9%. 8.4 of that is gifted. 5% is SLD, learning disabled, and another 1.5% is language impaired. That's the majority of their ESC.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank
So-
you.
we're gonna take a short break, it's 5 minutes,
I'm gonna make it 10.
10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Short 10-minute break.
You're not.
That's right.
I'd like to call this meeting to order, please, back to order. Recess is
Transfers.
over.
City.
You're right, yes, ma'am.
And Madam Superintendent, would you introduce the next item on the agenda, please?
Yes, I would like to. The next item on the agenda is an update from our learning support staff. So we have Dr. Steinke, and then we have Diane Taylor here and Jim Maxwell to bring that update to you.
Thank you. So Diane, ESC Director, Jim's our Student Services Director. They're my right and left hand, or left and right and left. Wanted to go today through a few things with Learning Support Division for Exceptional Student Ed and Student Services. First thing we'll talk about is what our student enrollment looks like right now. What is our school support structure, so how are we going out and supporting schools? What do we do for requests for support and consultation when a school has a request for a need, that they need some support in an area? What does our professional development look like from our division? And then a little bit about our ESC funding and what that looks like. So right now, we know that from our survey 2 in October, we have 104,000 students in Polk County. Out of those, 13,000 are students with disabilities, so we're at about 13%, which matches the national average and the state average for students with disabilities in the district. We have about 5,800 gifted learners. We haven't gotten the final breakdown by category from survey 2 yet, but that's generally about right where we are for gifted learners. So let's talk a little bit about our school support structure. This chart does not give the whole big picture, but of everything that we do, but this is the general main areas. So the first thing is we have, under the ESC director, which is Diane, of course, she has 7 ESC senior managers that report to her. Those senior managers guide the services directly to the schools. 5 of them are assigned to each of the regional assistant superintendents. And then under those 5, they have a team of academic behavior support teachers, which we refer to as ABIST. They have district coaches, district staffing specialists that handle all compliance at school levels, and then a plethora of itinerants that all report to those senior managers and work on their teams to support direct services to the schools. Diane also has a couple district TRSTs who are specialists in the autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disabilities areas. So we send those 2 ladies out on different cases and different things that happen throughout the district, especially with students with those disabilities. We also have 1 district licensed mental health counselor that works with Diane and works a lot with our students on IEPs that have some really severe mental health issues and is on their IEP that need those services. The other couple of senior managers that we have, one of them is Gregory Kent, you've met before. He does all of our pre-K services and transition. And then we have another one, Terry Crace, who handles all of our SEDNet, which is our grant with the state for serving students with severe emotional behavioral disabilities. And then she also handles the provision of our deaf, hard of hearing program, vision services, occupational therapy, all of those different areas, and especially design PE. So from Diane's division and our department and what she does, those senior managers are the critical factor in providing the school support. They are the direct liaisons with the regional assistant superintendents. We've, you know, with Dr. Ake's support and direction, we've dispersed our teams in that scenario now this year and aligned them with the regional assistant supes, and it's really been very helpful of getting that staff out. On Jim's side of the house, he has way more than just school psychologists and school social workers, but those 38 school psychologists and 22 school social workers are assigned to different schools based on geographic location, and they provide direct support to those schools, participating in MTSS team meetings, participating in evaluation meetings, IEP meetings, doing all the evaluations, handling attendance, anti-bullying resources, and all those types of things. So that's a big, broad overview of what our team looks like as far as school support structure.
Quick, so I just want to clarify. We have 60 total psychologists or counselors for 120 schools, 20, 30 schools. That's roughly.
We have 38 psychologists and 22 social workers.
Right, combined, that's 60. So we're well short of one a school. Like it's for
Okay.
either of the, yeah. Okay.
Beyond this team, we also provide, you guys have seen a lot of contracts that come through our division. So we use a lot of our funding, which I'll get into a little bit later, but for contracted supports. So one of the first areas that we provide is contracted mental health counselors. We have a $1.3 million contract with Baycare Winter Haven Behavioral Health. They provide all of the mental health counseling services for our students with IEPs. So they cover about 1,000 students with 20 of their counselors, depending on need of what those students' IEPs look like. We contract with 4 different companies for board certified behavior analysts. They are dispersed out to our schools as they go through the senior manager process, which I'll show shortly. They are serving about 50 students in our district right now that we call our highest tier, highest need students, and that's in about 30 schools that they're covering. Then we also have one of those behavior analyst companies is covering for our Mindful Schools grants schools, those 6 schools there. And then we have Ashley Miller, who serves our pre-K students with very challenging behaviors, because we do have them that start at age 3, 4, and 5 with some very severe behaviors that we're working with. Then we've also recently, just in November, we contracted with the new company, Invo Progressus. We hired another board certified behavior analyst and 5 registered behavior techs that are now serving in 5 targeted elementary schools. So from Scott Lake, Purcell, Wendell Watson, and Spook Hill, where we've had some students and some situations in some of our classrooms that require a very high level of behavior support. So that staff and that team is working in those 5 schools right now. The idea is that as they work there, we get those schools under control and those situations more stable, that eventually those RBTs could move to other schools, depending on where the need is. And then we also have another big group of contracted supports. We contract for speech language therapists because SLPs is a nationwide shortage area, and we cannot hire enough of them as direct hires. So we have 56 positions as direct hires, and then we contract with 6 companies for 23 more positions. And I can already tell you that that's still not enough for our students that have speech and language therapy needs. We're short there. We also have a contract for speech language therapy on the private school side of the house, because under federal law, as you know, we have to provide services for students in private schools, and that group has decided to use their funding for speech language therapists. We contract with 4 companies for 10 occupational and physical therapists. The Learning Resource Center is a big contract with us because they provide all of our tutoring services for students who have extended school year services on their IEP in the area of tutoring, and that goes all throughout the year and through in the summer. We contract for hearing services basically in the areas of assessments or IEP services. And we bring in interpreters and vision teachers for those types of assessments as well. And then we also have 3 companies that we contract with for nursing services for students that have that service on their IEP, and if our direct hire nurses are gonna be out, then these companies provide subs for us, both for our ESE nurses and for our clinic, all of our school clinics. So that's how we provide support as far as the staff is concerned, whether it's our direct staff or our contracted staff. Now we have a process in our division that our schools go through if they're requesting some kind of a support or consultation on a situation at their site. The process is designed to give teachers in a classroom, if they have a specific student they need support with, or if there's a general classroom support at a school that we've noticed through instructional review walkthroughs, or a regional assistant sup has a need and sees something, that's what this process is designed to support. We do require, as a part of the process, documentation of school level interventions and supports that they've already put in place or tried to implement prior to putting the request into our team. So to walk you through it really quick, the request for support and consultation, it's actually a form that's accessible to all of the schools. Typically it starts with the LEA facilitator at the school or a school administrator, and they submit that request form to the ESE area office. It goes to that ESE senior manager that's assigned to their school. From there, the information on that form is reviewed by the senior manager in consultation with their team, with their ABIS, their coaches. The regional assistant superintendent is often involved in those requests or discussions if they're high-level needs. But they go through that and look at that information. From there, that area office team determines what type of support is needed and who's the appropriate personnel to send to that site or to that classroom to assist in that situation. If it's a behavioral-based need, then we'll send an ABIST or somebody with that expertise. If it's a classroom instruction need, a teacher needs assistance with helping with implementing some of the curriculum, then we'll send an ESE district coach. Just kind of depends on what this situation is. And then the staff gets out to the school and works in that classroom, and they provide a lot of suggestions. They model strategies and model how to provide that support for students. And then they also keep a log of the services that they're providing support, and the senior managers keep track of that and monitor that so that they know how a situation is progressing and what's going on. There are times that if a contracted personnel, as far as a contracted behavior analyst, is required, typically Diane and I and Jim as well will be involved in some of those cases at that level, because sending out that level of support, of course, you know, is very high need, and resources are often thin, so we try and really gauge where we send those supports if we can, but we're very quick to get them out there in those situations. We don't hold back either. And we go to our professional development. We have all kinds of professional development that we do from our division. One of the first things we did this past summer that was exciting was we did our first Learning Support Summer Institute, where the two sides of our house came together, ESE and Student Services. They did 2 full days for teachers, and it was primarily 4 teachers actually to come, and they spent one half of the day learning about behavior supports, and the other half of the day learning about providing appropriate instruction to students with disabilities. It was very successful, and it's kind of been the model of the content and things that we want to move forward and have been throughout the year. And we're looking forward to continuing to do that each summer. Jim's team does a Mindful School Summer Symposium. They've done that the last couple of years. This past year, remember, we brought in Ron Clark and had about 2,000 staff come to that presentation. And then on day 2, many of them came back for some more work and some more information on providing mental health and some student services related support to students. We have a whole bunch of behavior support professional development opportunities we provide to schools, whether it's training for positive behavior interventions and supports, CHAMPS that you've heard from the professional development team, crisis prevention intervention and prevention crisis management are 2 very scripted and very specific areas that we do for restraining students and de-escalating students verbally, and what those proper techniques are. Those require certifications and things that staff can do. We've recently started increasing our trainings for functional behavior assessments, which is when a team has to come together and look at what are the reasons that a student might be displaying some inappropriate behaviors, what's the function of that, what is the student trying to do and accomplish through that, and then from that, how do they develop a behavior intervention plan to support that student. And then we also, Jim's team has been providing all of the training for behavior interventionists, which are positions at schools funded through Title I that support more students prior to becoming identified as a student with a disability. So he's been working with that group all year long, actually for the last 2 years with their trainings. We do a whole bunch of ESC compliance trainings. All of our LEA facilitators at all levels, elementary through high school, come in on a routine basis because they have to be updated on all the legal responsibilities of writing IEPs and holding meetings and doing eligibilities. So they have a whole lot of IEP trainings they do there. We also do IEP present levels, annual goals and objectives, accommodations. Those are all offered for teachers as well. So we do those throughout the year. And then we do a lot of mental health and crisis response professional development for school teams and individuals to know how to serve students when they're having mental health crises, when we have crises on campus, whether it's a student death, a staff member, you know, a situation, some kind of student who may be exhibiting some kind of a threat to the campus, and what all that may look like and what are the responsibilities there. Our anti-bullying team goes out to schools and works with them in situations where there might be situations of bullying occurring on a campus and how to handle that. And then we have a great partnership with our DCF and Heartland liaisons that we do a lot of training with community members in the mental health area so that we can maintain those partnerships for supporting our students as they go through those processes. And then lastly, you've heard about FIDLRS, Florida Diagnostic Learning Resource Systems. That's under Dr. Poinsettia Tillman, who reports to Ms. Taylor, and they work within our district and Hardy County to provide professional development for all teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators. It's how we can help get our ESC certification for our teaching certificate. But this is just a handful of the trainings that they provide. They've done about 130 sessions already this year and have trained about 1,500 staff that have gone through their professional development options. So they're always around and they're statewide. Then if we get into our funding, so when we talk about our funding for our students with disabilities and what that comes from, we have two primary resources that our funding comes from. It's either our local dollars or our federal dollars under IDEA. We have 5 main categories of what our expenses include. First one is personnel. Of course, we you know, about 75 to 80% of our funding goes to personnel, which includes classroom personnel, administrators, extended school year, and travel that we have to support for our staff. I've already shared with you a lot about our contracted support that we provide, so we have a whole area of contracts that we fund either from local dollars or federal dollars. Of course, we have operational expenses. We have to provide supplies, equipment for schools, for individual students. We do rentals and repairs for a lot of that equipment, and then we also have to provide finances for student transportation in situations where we have a student who may not be able to ride one of our regular school buses and needs private transportation. Then under federal dollars, as you know, we're required to allocate some of the funding for private schools, and then we also are required to allocate some of that money for the charter schools. So those are very specific line items. So this chart gives you just a little snapshot of our ESC department funding for the last 3 years, whether it's been from the local side of the house or the federal IDA side of the house, and how it's changed over the last 3 years and grown. One of the things that we've done over the last 2 years very specifically is we have really looked at how we were allocating the funding between local and federal dollars to take some of the things that we were paying for out of federal, such as contracted supports, and we moved them over to the local side of the house and paid for them out of local dollars so that we could turn around and bill Medicaid so we could get reimbursement for those services. Because if you're paying for something out of the IDA federal grant, you can't bill Medicaid for it. So we switched some of our contracts over to the local side of the house so we could do that. And then at the same time, we moved some of our operational costs or some other things over to the federal side of the house to pay for those, you know, that we can't bill Medicaid for or not reimbursable expenses. So we've really tried to maximize how we're spending our dollars out of the appropriate funds, and so that we could get the most bang for our buck, number one, and at the same time as equally provide the best services and things for our students that we can with those dollars. But you can see that over time, we have increased all of our funding towards students with disabilities in this district, and not only have the cost increased due to behavior supports, personnel supports, mental health needs, but just, you know, a variety of things that have caused those costs to go up. And then we have $800,000 we allocate to private schools and another $1.2 million for charter schools.
Okay. Questions? Ms. Sellers and Mr. Allison.
As a board member,
Yes.
many of the challenges that we see in our schools come from the area of ESE. And how many right now, I know we have a teacher shortage, and I see from the state level, it's very difficult to get certified as an ESE teacher. The state seems to think that they need to continue to increase the rigor. And so where are we as a district with having enough ESE certified teachers? How many subs do we have? And how are we dealing with that challenge?
The last that we talked, we had
17
16
current positions that were open ESE, ESE positions that were open across the district. And it's not that bad, I guess, if you think about the amount of students and the amount of overall ESE services we provide. So that number has steadily decreased as the year has progressed.
But we have about 17 now?
About 17, yes ma'am.
What do we do for those classes? Because if you have a sub, how are we supporting those schools that don't have those certified teachers?
When we know where those rooms are, and our senior managers, one of the main responsibilities they have is to know every ESE unit that's in a class, in a school, what that looks like, if it's a separate class unit with students with, you know, more cognitive disabilities, or if it's an inclusion class, where those vacancies are, and then through that request for support process, or just us being aware that a situation, a classroom has a substitute in it, we will send out our team to model, work alongside that sub, help them with classroom lesson plans, help them with scheduling, classroom setup, working with the students. That's exactly what our team does through that support process.
Okay. Mr. Townsend's next.
First, I just want to thank you for this. This is very, very, very helpful. Thank you. I have several questions. Just one functionally, in the IDEA money, that's all federal, right? There's not a state component to it.
No,
It's
all
just
federal.
okay. Does it come directly to us, or does it go through Tallahassee?
Through Tallahassee.
Okay. The increase from 17 million to 21 million, is that reflective of Medicaid, or is that just reflective of more money coming through IDEA?
This is the expenses that we incurred. So our grant for this school year was about 22 million for the IDA federal dollars that we received. The 17 million from last year is what we spent out of that grant.
Oh, I see. So
some of it rolled over.
So you've got spending here versus funding on.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably should have labeled that as spending.
Okay. Okay. All right. No, that's fine. I know. I think you're doing the right thing by the Medicaid thing. So, tell me. You know, I don't know if you can reach down. I mean, Hazel's exactly right. This is probably the number one thing that many of us get contacted about and think about. What 2 or 3 things keep you up at night in dealing with this? What's your give me your wish list that's reasonably achievable by an obnoxious person like me.
This is just my own personal Kimberly Steinke wish list. First of all, and this is not specific to Polk County, this is just overall, a true understanding of what the world of special education means. and how students are supposed to be served, what IDA, the law is all about, and what it takes to do that would be number one. I feel like if you have that, you know, the rest of it kind of makes sense. Number two, probably for here, our biggest struggle right now is supporting our students who are coming in with behavioral challenges. That's definitely what's keeping us up late at night or waking us up first thing in the morning with phone calls or text or situations. And I know it's our biggest challenge for our teachers and for our principals.
Let's drill down a little bit. Is that a personnel challenge or is that a training problem? Is it a quantitative or qualitative?
Well, it's not isolated just here to this district.
Right.
And so on that side of the house, that part makes me feel a little bit better, knowing it's not just here. In my experience, I think kids are just harder these days. I do think, you know, we have really concentrated and increased a lot of our professional development over the last year or two since I've been here in the behavior area so that we can provide more training to our staff. You know, whether it's through de-escalation and the restraint techniques for the students who need that, or it's just the how do you even assess a student's behavior and determine what those functions are, to understanding really what it means to have a true MTSS structure in place across a school and a positive behavior
in MTSS again.
multi-tiered system of supports. I'm sorry, we live in the world of acronyms.
So I think what I'm hearing there is it's a manpower question or a woman power question. The more resources we have, you feel like the training is more or less in place. It's the people to execute it. Is that accurate?
I think there's a combination of both. I mean, obviously, the more hands on deck, the better it can always be. And there's a professional development component too.
Okay. And one last thing, and then I'll be done. This dovetails back to the discussion at the very beginning. What you just said, the true understanding what it takes to do it. We have to be explaining that all the time, and we don't explain it publicly. I mean, you know, we just have to. We have to make people aware of the challenges of it. People are actually pretty understanding if you explain to them what the scale is, what the scope is. They'll work with us. We have to do better at that, and that's for everybody in the room. That's me. That's everybody. We have to. The public has to be engaged on this with us. So that's my soapbox. But thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Mr. Harris.
If we could go back to slide number 3. One prior to that. 13% of the students have disabilities. That includes the charter schools.
Yes.
What percentage of disabilities do the charter school students serve?
I'd have to look that up. I don't have that, but I can.
I bet it's way under 13%.
It's not 13.
My point is, if you're going to be my competitor, I expect you to deal with the same challenges that I deal with and to have the same demographics that I have. Otherwise, I don't think you should be my competitor. End of soapbox. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Fields.
I have a couple of questions. I don't expect the answers today, but can you provide us with the subgroup, the breakdown by subgroups as it relates to ethnicity, gender, all of the specifics? Okay. And the funding, you said 75% was personnel. What's the remainder of the breakdown? I don't need it today, but if you can provide that, because I know we're running out of time. And I know the answer, but I'm going to present it anyway. Do we have enough staff in place to meet the needs of our ESE students? And if not, what do we need in order to meet their needs, resource needs? Understanding? Okay, I just want to make sure. And the last question, and I can give this to you if I need to. Did we reduce our contracted dollars awarded to our nonprofits? And if so, why? And if you didn't, then I understand that. But my understanding is that at least one nonprofit lost some resources, and if those resources were lost, who will now provide the services for those kids? And I can be more specific after the meeting if I need to. Okay. Yeah, I need that.
Okay. We have none.
And Ms. Sellers?
One other statistic, I know, because I believe Bartow Middle, which is by the state one of the struggling schools, I believe their ESE population is 25%. So what are our struggling schools? What is their percent? If our district-wide is 13%, do we see a trend of struggling schools having a bigger proportion of ESE kids than our countywide average?
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, thank you for this presentation. It's very helpful and eye-opening. I guess I don't guess, I agree with Mr. Townsend that communication is key. But what are some strategies that we might implement to better communicate?
Well, I can tell you some of the things that we've done over the last year. We, at the beginning of this year and last year, we had a learning support meet and greet for families, where all of our staff, we did a couple nights, we did one night last year and a couple nights this year on the different sides of the district regionally, where we explain our division, what supports are there, how parents can access us, our community members, whoever, what we do, introduced everybody, gave an opportunity for parents to meet us face to face and hear about what we do and know how to contact us. We're actually on March 10th, and I appreciate the opportunity for the plug. We are going to do our second Polk Symposium on Special Education on March 10th. It's an all-day event on Saturday at Tenor Rock High School. We will have a whole bunch of sessions for families to come in and learn about behavior supports or IEPs, all that. We have a whole lot of vendors that come and set up for resources, community agencies or agencies that specifically support and work with families with students with disabilities. It's a great opportunity for families to come and have all that in one place. They can bring their children with them. So we do that, and we're looking forward to that. We serve them a free lunch from Chick-fil-A. So they can come and, it was great last year. I'm looking forward to the challenge that I've challenged the team is I want it bigger and better this year and every year going forward. So we do that. We have been trying to work more closely with our EC advisory as far as getting information out and getting information there, and what that looks like. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Could you send us information on that, please?
Yes, on the symposium? Absolutely.
Mr. Townsend?
But there's a component to this that I think it's not just important to reach ESE people. I mean, ESE people need to know, parents need to know what's available to them. The public needs to understand the scale of the challenge, the scope of the challenge. They need to understand how funding matters, how, and I think we can just, again, it gets back to the thing I talked to at the beginning. We can be writing this stuff anytime and repeating it. Like, right, here are the big challenges with ESE. Public, one, behavior, blah, 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 blah. People are hearing this stuff all the time, informally, online, on social media. They're talking to each other about it. They're already here. They already know all the challenges. They just don't know them with precision and depth. So let's give them the precision and depth that we can refer back to it. Here's this. And I'm sure a lot of the stuff exists in various spots on our website, and we're going to be updating that. But to actually engage the public about things that are important beyond just the immediate availability to the people who need it, so that the public understands the scale of the challenge. And I think we have an obligation and an ability to do that. I mean, I'll volunteer myself to help write some of this stuff up for you. I mean, it's what I do for a living. I write things. I'm happy to do it, and just that's what we need to be doing. That's my answer to that.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I agree. I understand. I think we're doing a wonderful job with our parents and folks who are internal. The communication, somehow we need to, I think, identify some strategies that are external, and I don't know what those are. That's not my area of expertise, but whatever we can do to help, please let us know.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is, while they're transitioning, is Dr. Akes is going to come forward to present the recommendation with our external operator. I wanted to remind everyone, this was the recommendation that when we had to make a selection, we had 3 choices to make a selection. 2 are off the table, as I presented to you earlier. The first one was reassign all the students and close the school. The second one was charter school, and the last one was select an external operator that will manage the day-to-day operations of the building if these schools do not make the grade of a C. This actually was to be decided, and the recommended date for us to notify DOE that we were actually having a conversation in the contract with an external operator was January 31st. The team wanted to make sure that we looked at some of the operators, and I'm not going to get into the presentation that Dr. Ace is going to present, but we wanted to make sure that we looked at external operators that were out there and that we choose the one that was the best fit for Polk County. The number one question, as you would, as he starts to present this, was that when our schools make the grade of a C, and notice I did not say if, I said when they make the grade of a C, that these external operators are willing to relinquish these schools back to us for our management. They would not manage these schools. And that was our number one question to them. So as he begins the presentation, then at the end you will hear the recommendation in mine, and he would tell you some decision points in making this recommendation that he's bringing on my behalf from the committee. Dr. Ace.
And
go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
Madam Superintendent, if I could, I want to make this abundantly clear. Closing those schools, turning those schools over to charter schools, or turning them to charter schools, never on the table for us. The focus was always in maintaining control of those schools within our district. So thank you, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This morning, what I wanted to be able to do is share with you the process that we use to look at the possibility of bringing in an external operator. I know that as Ms. Bird has talked about, I think that you know, our staff, our teachers, our principals are working hard every day. It's not a possibility of whether these schools may or may not improve. The question is just, are we going to make it this year, or is it going to take one more year? But a lot has to be said, and I think commended for the staff, the work that they do every day in these buildings. The lift is real, and the things that we have to overcome in these situations, sometimes people don't have an understanding for that. I know that a lot was said over the past week of, you know, well, why would we even consider to do this? Why is the school district, or this, you know, are we not able to improve our schools? And I think there's a couple things that need to be shared on this. Last year, when our school grades come out, over 90% of our schools, either the school grade improved or maintained. You know, in the last 3 years, we've improved the metrics for graduation from 68% to 72% to now a 75% graduation rate. The question is, how did we get to this point today? When the Senate Bill 7069 came into effect and the state board rule that then drives school improvement was changed in reference to that, it accelerated the decisions you had to make with turning around schools. Currently, we have 6 schools that have been in turnaround. This is either their second or their third year or more in this differentiated accountability model. And because of Senate Bill 7069 and because of the change in the state board rule, we are now being forced to make another choice. Now, we could go on and probably go back and forth about the merits of that particular Senate bill or the state board rule as a result of it, but I don't have the luxury of having that discussion point. You know, at this point, we're bound by statute to move forward, and I think that as the responsibility that lies with us is how do we make this into a positive, like a win-win situation for our students, and I think that's what we're about today. So as we're looking through this for an external operator, I think both the superintendent and the board chair removed right off the bat what were not an options for us. And I think that we really were able to center around on the external operator as being that choice for Polk County. We have the 6 schools that are in this particular category are Griffin, Garner, and Lake Marion Creek. Also Bartow Middle, Kathleen Middle, and Lake Alfred Polytech. These are the 6 schools that have been in the turnaround for this being their second or more years in turnaround. We do have other schools that we're working with. that would be in the differentiated accountability, the comprehensive school improvement model, but these are the 6 that would be impacted this particular school year. The plans that we're looking for, or this particular choice, would not go into effect until next year. And if, as Ms. Bird said, one of the criteria that we looked at is as these schools improve, and if we make the C this particular summer, will we be able to then move out of this particular contracted situation with our external operator. So we formed a committee that reviewed the different proposals, and we looked at, together we looked at what are the options out there, what companies are out there, and what are the possibilities of us bringing in an external operator that would meet our needs. As Mr. Wilson and Ms. Bird both talked about, we had to select a different choice. Right now, we were working with district managed just the turnaround itself. That's been the choice that we have. Of those 6 schools, if you actually pulled up and looked online through the DOE or the Differentiated Accountability website, you would see that 2 of those schools of the 6 would be what would be considered a hybrid, where we're working together with the DOE. That's like Alfred Polytech and also Kathleen Middle. So they're actually in more than their 2nd year, but their 3rd year. And so we have to make a choice other than the ones that we've already chosen. So those other 2, the other 3 are completely off the table for these particular 6 schools. So Ms. Bird turned this in as our selection sheet as we go through, so we would go with an external operator. So we actually looked at for companies that would meet our needs in this situation. Now, one of the things that we learned right off the bat was there's not a list of these successful external operators that you can go access. One of the things that's being proposed right now in the legislation is that they actually come up with such a list, or a list of charter schools that would be considered the high-performing ones that would be options for under the charter school, but there's not a list out there. So through discussing this with the DOE, Ms. Bird looking and soliciting options that other superintendents have looked at, and also in communication with our regional executive director, we came up with 3 possible options or companies that we thought may would fit the bill for us on this. The first one was Learning Science International. This may be familiar to you because we do a lot of professional development with this particular company, and it found a lot of its founding initiatives are through Marzano's work, and this company has been around a while, and it is very well-grounded in research-based techniques. As we look at what are the highlights for their particular proposal, one of the things right off the bat that you'll realize with LSI, they wanted a 5-year plan when they looked at it. One of the things is they wanted to have primary oversight, and this would be right down in here in this particular area of it. If you'll look, it says that. Their particular mode of going in and working with schools is very prescriptive and very restrictive. And one of the things that you'll look at the bottom, when you get down to the bottom, which is the cost, if we were to go with this particular company in the spring of this year, we would need to do a needs assessment, which would be $62,000. During the summer, we would move into a readiness phase, which would be $80-something thousand. And then for the years after that, for years 1 and 2, that's close to $1 million a year per school for the first 2 years. And it was also not as willing, and they were pretty restrictive on what happens if you make a C. So that was kind of a downside when we looked at this particular company. Again, very restrictive. They have a prescriptive way of approaching this business, which I respect, but also it's very costly as we go into it.
Dr. Ake, excuse me, I think we have a couple questions. Could we ask have some questions asked? Mr. Townsend, and then Mrs.
Just a brief clarification, sorry.
Well, I think I would like to make it clear that they were not willing to return the schools back to us if we received a C, at least not immediately. Is that correct?
That's correct. In other words, for this particular company, the way that they gear up and staff their company, through the conversation that we had during the presentation, they were not able to meet that particular need at the time we discussed with them.
Okay. And Mrs. Cunningham, did you have a quick?
Yes, what is, I mean, they've been around a while, what is their track record? Have they done something similar? Tell me
Okay,
something similar to this, and have they been successful? Because
Okay,
it says at the end, we'll begin, offer to begin back at year 3, and I'm like,
okay, so, you're talking about at the very bottom, Ms.
Yeah.
Cunningham?
Mhm.
Okay, that's actually the progression that they would go through. The comprehensive needs assessment, which is the spring, the next one is the readiness phase, that moves into the summer.
right?
But then, the 5-year plan and what the costs were for those 5 years is what it's referring to at the back, down at the bottom,
Right.
okay?
So my question is, what is their track record in doing this,
Um,
in providing this service? Have they
They
done
have,
it?
they do have some proven, they have a proven track record in some schools. It's not, as wide, breadth as what you would, look to, but they're not only a Florida company, they're a nationwide company. But they have worked with some schools in Florida and have turned them around.
And that turnaround has remained consistent after they've left?
Yes, ma'am, about what they actually, provided to us, yes, ma'am. But it's also over 5 years. You gotta
I
realize
understand.
that they wanted to stay with it for 5 years.
Can I like add something?
Certainly.
Also, this company, they weren't actually listed as even an external or academic management in the school. They were actually in the school providing professional development within there at that time when those schools moved forward. I would also add the part you're referring to is beginning at year 3.
Yes.
When the schools make the C, say this year when they make the C, they're not willing to relinquish the contract. They're willing to bring you in at year 3 of the contract, which is $495,000.
So that means at year 3, they would stay, and then they expect 2 more years
That's absolutely correct.
from the time that the school makes a C.
Absolutely correct, and that's management. They're wanting to manage them starting at year 3, not really
They-
negotiating a contract.
They want control of the schools.
Got it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else in clarification? Great question. The second proposal was by Ed Directions. This is a mid-sized educational company with 20 years' experience, both in working with schools, turning around and professional development initiatives. They've worked with developing some systems and computer data tracking to track their initiatives, and also they've got some patents on the way that they approach the school improvement process, which is unique to their company. Again, this particular company may be familiar with you because we have done some contract work with them in working with some of our schools with turning them around. The highlights of their proposal was that they actually outlined a 2 to 3 year plan that they would work with us in these particular schools. They really work on a backwards plan by design, where they actually look at, how they will turn around and approach this work. It's not as prescriptive as the other company, and they're not as prescriptive on the particular curriculum that they use. What they really are looking for is how do we improve the instruction within the classroom, how do we work with the culture and the climate, and it's more collaborative in nature. When we get down to the bottom where we're looking at the actual cost per school, they also would need to look at a needs assessment for the schools, and then you actually see the cost per year, and it's based on the school needs. And right off the bat, that they were willing to, once the school achieves the C, relinquishing the management of those schools, oversight of those schools, completely back to the school district. In other words, they were open to once the school received the C, then the contract would go away. Questions on this one? Okay. Our third proposal was from MGT. This is a consulting company that is based out of Tallahassee right now. Also familiar with some work in Tampa. They've worked with some school districts across the United States. They've done some work in Gary, Indiana. They've also worked with Hamilton and Madison County up in the Panhandle, keeping in mind that both those counties are not the same size and scope of our school district. They had a 2 to 3 year transition plan. When we're looking at their particular methodology of when they come in, when you're looking at the way that they do it, they also talked about the planning backwards by design. But they also wanted to make sure that when you're looking at it, they had full-time people they would have on staff that were talking about the fidelity of implementation of their school improvement process. And when you're looking at the bottom line down there at the price per school was over $700,000. And there was a difference if there was 1 to 6 schools or 6 schools, or if it was less than 6, what it would be. And they was willing to renegotiate the contract. It wasn't that they would be completely out of working with the school as far as the management, but they were willing to sit back down and have that discussion. So they still wanted to be able to stay engaged in that particular school, even if it reached a C. So these were the decision points when we looked at them. One, of course, you got to look at the bottom line with that cost. The majority of the funds that are going to be required to pay for this is going to come out of local funds. We wanted to look at the years of experience, their track record. Do they know how to improve schools, and are they able to do that in several different locations and similar demographics as we have? Their flexibility in their contract and commitment to release to schools, and are they collaborative? In other words, whenever they're working with your school, is it a collaborative or is it a top-down approach? It was very, very important to us as we looked at it from the committee standpoint, their approach with them. When we started looking and going through the 3 options, one option stood out right off the bat for us as we started going through these decision points. When we looked at the collaborative nature of our work with Ed Directions and the way that they actually are familiar with us and that there's a level of trust there, we feel like that Educational Directions offers us the flexibility and our needs within our school districts, and also offers us the expertise to bring to the table to improve our schools. When looking at this, I felt that as a committee, it would really meet our needs. They've already done some work with us in our district. If you remember the work that we've done at Denison, or the work that we've done at Westside and some of the other schools. It's collaborative in nature. It's a team approach, and I believe that they would best suit our needs in this particular situation.
Mrs. Cunningham?
Thank you, sir. Question, in looking at proposal 2, if I'm reading it correctly, 325 to 350,000 based upon school needs assessment. So that's the cost per school per year. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So when I multiplied that out, it came to $1,950,000 for 6 schools.
Yes,
Is that
ma'am.
correct?
Roughly.
Roughly.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So would we say that would be the most expensive of the 3?
For proposal 2?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is that's a great clarification.
Huh?
This is a per school cost.
They're all per school.
Yeah.
I thought, never mind, I thought it said in
I think this is the
parentheses
least
6
expensive.
schools,
It's the
so
least
I read that
That's
as,
the least expensive.
oh, I read that as for all 6 schools, it would be that amount. That is not true.
No, of course
See,
not.
year 1, parentheses, 6 schools, 734,000 per school based, okay, so I read it wrong. All right, very good, thank you for clarifying that.
Mr. Harris?
A couple of questions. One, we have one of the 6 schools is in a very unique situation, AKA its location. Did we consider, and why did they not step up and volunteer, for Lake Alfred Polytech? There's a charter school right next door. They basically take a lot of the students that would go to that school away from that school. Why does Discovery not express an interest in running the middle school right next door to them. That would seem a very logical next step, and I kind of expected, and have said so, that they ought to take over the school if they have such a high record in regard for the kids in that corner of the county. That's my first question.
Mr. Townsend?
I mean, I think.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, Ms.
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Sellers.
Go ahead.
Oh,
I've got,
I was- I mean-
my first
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry,
He
I
hasn't responded,
apologize.
and I've got another one.
I apologize. I need to pay better attention, I'm sorry.
Mr. Harris, in response to the question about whether Discovery would or would not want to approach us, again, that's not within my purview for soliciting that. The task.
Did we reach out to them and ask them?
No, sir, the task that we have at hand and the parameters by which we wanted to be able to approach this was we wanted to ensure that the students stayed within our school district. We wanted to ensure that our employees stayed within our school district, ensuring that when we're looking at that, there are some other things, mitigating things that we need to be considerate of. That I think that when we're looking at that, an employee that's been with us 15, 20 years, and you know, we just don't overnight turn the keys over to a charter school, and this particular employer, set of employees, may have a retirement, may have health insurance, all those things that go into it. I think you have to be considerate of the students and the staff there, and we feel that that once we turn the corner there at Lake Alfred, then the tide's going to also turn with the students coming back into that school, and we're starting to see some of that now.
I agree with you 100%, and I'm not disagreeing with that evaluation. My point is, this would give a charter school an opportunity to show their mettle dealing with the same demographics that we deal with.
Yes,
If they can't step up to the plate, it's only because they have a different clientele that they are showing success. My point was to put them on the hot seat, just like the school district is, in dealing with that clientele. My second question, in the bottom of each one of these proposals, there's cost per school. What do we get for that cost per school? Is that the administrative cost, and we will then not have the current administrators at those schools? Exactly what is it the district gets for that money?
Mr. Harris, that's a great question and a great clarification. For all three of these situations, of course, the level of support may vary, and it varies also with the number of schools, but also the cost per school. Currently, we would still be responsible for staffing that school as we go into it and negotiate this contract. We would still be responsible for the education of the students, also making sure that we work collaboratively with the recommendation that we're going with would be ed directions on the leadership that would be placed at that school. It would be a collaborative nature. What the companies would bring in, what ed directions would bring to the table, educational directions would bring to the table, would be the support that would be needed for leadership. And if they needed extra support for coaching, that we may need instructional coaching in that school in addition to what we're placing there. So we still would be working collaboratively for staffing that school with ed directions. We still have the responsibility of educating those students, and the responsibility still lies within the school board to ensure that the needs of the students and staff be met.
So all the current staff members, including the teaching staff and administrative staff, would stay on board?
I would say that's a yes, but it's also a yes with a caveat, and I'm going to make sure that that's very, very clear. The superintendent and this company would evaluate the situation, and I'm going to say as first would be response to, and y'all know this, leadership is what's looked at first from the Department of Education. And the superintendent would have to answer the question, will the principal stay in place? And the superintendent will have to affirm, or whatever plan that is, with the leadership, not just the educational directions, but the DOE. That would be first. The only caveat to the staff that I would see at this particular point is not a new caveat, and it has to do with the VAM scores of teachers that are there. And I think I want to be very transparent. That issue and that particular requirement will be in place, and it will be heavily scrutinized from the Department of Education. I will say that we've been very proactive to try to make sure that we get teachers resituated in either an area where their VAM will not affect them, but we have also moved teachers to ensure that all the teachers are able to remain within the school district. And while it's an unfortunate situation that we have absolutely no control over, that would be the two caveats that I would say to your questions.
Ms. Sellers?
Part of my question, I wanted to know about the leadership. And so we really have an opportunity to keep some leadership if we feel they're on the right track, even if they don't make a C this year. And that would be a collaborative decision between you and education directions,
and then we will both have to have that conversation with our state executive director at that point, but they're willing to have that collaboration effort with us.
And the state, because we're choosing this, may give us some leeway on leaving some leadership if we feel that they're the right fit for the school.
And I'm referring to these 6 schools.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, it would have to be with the caveat that we would have to be able to justify the rationale why. Okay.
Right.
In other words, within a few of these schools, we just put new principals there.
Yeah.
So we recognize that usually it takes 2 to 3 years for those things to take place, and also the Department of Education and Educational Directions recognizes that too. But I will tell you this, the reason why I think that this particular recommendation is the right one, because the Educational Directions will be very transparent if they feel like, and they will give it to us in writing, that we're not headed in the right direction in a particular area. So it won't be that that you won't know what's going on with schools. Yes, ma'am.
I think Mr. Townsend
I'm sorry.
had a question.
It's all right, go ahead.
Sure,
Yeah, go.
mine's quick. Talking about the leadership, my question is, I understand that that's gonna be a discussion about the leadership
Yes, ma'am.
at the school. But something that concerns me would be a commitment from existing leadership, or one that you are thinking of placing there, that there is a commitment for X amount of years to see this thing through. How do you approach that? Because that's very important. You can't have somebody say, yeah, I want to stay, I stay, and then a year from now it's like, whoops, sorry, not going to do this, or
Right.
choose to, I mean, I don't know how you do that, because I know that's not part of it, but I think that's very important. Continuity is huge in accomplishing this goal, and with the money that's going to be put forward to try to do this, I just feel that we need to have some sort of commitment from the top leadership that is chosen to be at these 6 schools, that they will continue
Yes,
to
ma'am.
be.
I think that's a valid point. I think that and I know y'all know this, but the staff that go to these schools day in, day out, they're really committed to trench work. They are committed to putting their back into it every day. And that goes from the leadership to the classroom teacher, to the lunchroom worker, to the custodian. They recognize where they're at. And it's a work of, I would say, committed from your heart. So I think a lot of times in situations like that, when you're very transparent, like the principal that moved, over to Griffin this year, willingly went there, wanted to go there, knows the need for the kids. They're committed for the long haul with it. And I think that commitment from, which I've also seen the superintendent has shown that when you're putting your effort and your best foot forward, we're willing to stand behind you as a school district, regardless if you may have some ebb and flows or some
Sure.
struggles.
Sure.
So it goes both ways, and I recognize that situation. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Townsend.
All right, so Ms. Kay ahead of me, it's fine if she wants to go.
No, you go.
This may take a few minutes, I got a couple of things so we are going to vote on this at some point on 227, is that?
Yes.
Is that?
Next board
Okay.
meeting.
Board
Right,
meeting.
next
Okay.
board meeting.
Okay. First question, when you make reference to the regional executive director, you talking about Gail Setter?
Yes, sir.
I think we need to ask her to be here. That's I doubt seriously she's the primary driving force. I think she's just a messenger. I would like to know who the human beings we talk to at DOE are beyond her. Who's communicating through her? Is it her Herschel Lyons? Who's the key human being? Because I want that name.
Communicating the
This,
options we
yeah.
select.
Say go do X, Y, and Z. Is it? I mean, is all the communication coming from Gail, or are there other people? Or is she just passing on somebody else's name, like the will of somebody else?
When the options actually came, those options came from the commissioner through the chancellor to the Reds to us at that point. When, and this was all birthed out of, like Bob said, it was actually sped up because of HB 7069.
So when
This is what drove this to move in action.
So it's
It was
Stewart.
HB.
It's Stewart to Lyons, and then Ms. Setter is the final communicator, who has not been present. None of them have been present for any of this. They're just dictating this from on high. I would like to formally request that a DOE representative be here for that vote. I suspect they'll say no, but we need to ask. So that's part one. Concerning your question about the charter schools, Tim, it's my understanding that there was some actual approach made to McKeel about this.
They're not next door.
But let me finish.
That was all.
And DOE said that absolutely not. No locally operated charter school is able to do this. That's my understanding, which just goes to show we're all in the same boat. I mean, Lake Wales doesn't qualify as a School of Hope operator. McKeel doesn't. It's all garbage.
Let me just add to that, to clarify, not to disagree, but I want to point out some of the maybe inconsistency in saying that none of the charter schools are eligible. Jefferson County, next door to Tallahassee, had to be taken over by a charter school operator.
Yeah.
Who was reached out to by DOE to ask to take over Jefferson County? The Lake Wales Charter Group. They're good enough to go across the state, but nobody in this county is good enough to take over a school right next door to themselves. I see a little problem.
Right. It's pretty chaotic. What I think you guys have made the right choice, if we're going to make a choice. I mean, I think this is, and I fully respect your professional obligations to do this. So this nothing I'm saying here is critical of any of what you've done here. You know, I think it's a political decision on the behalf of the community and the board to decide what we're going to do on this. And my question, I'd like Wes or somebody to game this out with me. If we vote no, we're not going to do any of this. I don't see a mechanism in the statute, an or else mechanism like this will happen. What I assume would happen is the authority would revert to the state to come and impose something, one of these three choices. At that point, the state owns it completely. I'm not going to own this. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm voting against this. If the state wants to come close these schools, if the state wants to waste millions of dollars on external operators and take that money right out of Polk County kids' hands, they're going to do it themselves. If they want to come in and impose some fraudulent charter school from out of state that they've all got financial ties to, they're going to do it themselves. I'm not doing it. And you know, so I guess my question is, Wes, what do you think is my interpretation of the legal framework of that? I don't really dispute their legal ability to do it.
Yeah.
I do dispute the constitutionality of 7069, which we're challenging now. Good.
The answer to your question is, I don't know. The State Board of Education operates under their own guidelines. Sometimes they, like federal agencies, issue guidance that have all the force and effect of rules, but they don't go through the rulemaking process to do it. What their thought process might be and what they might elect to do, I am not sure. Certainly, you know, they've given direct communication to some districts when it comes to House Bill 7069 and the funding of capital outlay for charter schools, they came right out and told the districts that they would take the money directly out of their pocket. Whether they would do that over this, I don't know. The other concern that you might have, however, is that if the board takes action that is contrary to Florida law, the person who lives in the next office over from the Department of Education is the Attorney General of the state of Florida, and you have the Governor of the state of Florida, and you would have issues arising as to whether the board as an entity was acting in violation of Florida law, and board members can be individually held accountable for complying with Florida law. So those are things to bear in mind. Sometimes you think what we're doing is a political game, and it is until it becomes a legal game. And so there will never come a time that I advise my client as a group or the individual members of my client board to violate the laws of the state of Florida. There is a mechanism for challenging those. Certainly the 7069 litigation is an exercise of that in the courts. But that said, you know, when DOE comes down and says, no, a local charter school can't do that, I don't see that anywhere in writing. I think that is something they interpreted. They produced that as if it were a rule. Perhaps there is a rule, I'm just not aware of it. But I'm not aware of it if they went through the rulemaking process and decided that couldn't happen. That sounds to me like somebody at the department saying, I don't think that's what that means, we're not going to do it. I think there is room for conversation within those parameters. But I am also mindful that, you know, those things that an agency is charged with doing by law and the Constitution, the agency is generally entitled to a certain amount of discretion, a certain amount of presumption, and if the state board decrees something that we don't wish to do, then, you know, we go against their wishes and direction at our peril, and we know that they hold the purse strings, and it may be that they're wrong, and it may be that after a year or 18 months in the court systems, we would establish that they were wrong, and they would be compelled to write that check after all. There are also politics involved, and it may be that you know, that there's room for some elbowing and jostling to determine, you know, if funds are being withheld and children are suffering, you know, whose fault is that? You know, and you would have the local school districts pointing at the state, and you'd have the state pointing at the local school districts, and how that comes out is a crystal ball that is in somebody else's pay scale.
Just a quick follow-up. So is there in the law, does it say the district must choose? I don't have this in front of me.
Yeah.
It just.
Yeah, it says, I believe what it says is that there are defined options, and the district has the obligation to choose one of those.
Ms. Fields?
I see this as a temporary situation. I believe wholeheartedly that our schools are gonna move. And I think that's the message that we need to make sure that the community hear from us, is that this is temporarily, and we're gonna put the resources in place to move the schools like they should be moved. And Dr. X already said, we've got the staff, they're working hard, and educational directors are willing to work with us. I guess my question is, what staff person will be working directly with educational director? Ms. Jackie, would that be you? Would that be Dr. Aikes?
It'd be both Dr. X and I.
Okay.
Yes.
And then what I would say is, once we get past this, we need to make sure that Dr. Aikes or someone is present at the CAT meetings to explain this process and to explain what we're discussing today, because we've got to get the message out that when these schools make the C, they are going to be released, but with support. so that they don't have to go back. And I think it's gonna be critical for the community to understand that. It has to be the resounding message in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Mrs. Cunningham.
Okay, couple things. One, I agree with Ms. Fields, because we've already done this. We've turned around, I know in my district, several schools over the past few years, and done a wonderful job in doing so. So I think getting that message out, we're not there yet. Let's, put all our efforts, which we've been doing, and personnel to be able to raise our kids up. Secondly, I wanted to piggyback on what Mr. Townsend said, and Wes, if you can help. Number one, we're in litigation over House Bill 7069, so it's kind of hard to say go ahead and do this and us do it, but yet we still haven't resolved it over here. So my question is, number one, not to be answered today, if you could, are other districts considering not doing this? Should their school, a school of theirs, drop down? Is anyone else considering telling the state, I'm sorry, no, if you want to come in, close it? Number two, if we were to take that, if we had one school, which I hope we don't, what are the sanctions that have been expressed across the state? I haven't heard of anything other than, you need to do it, you need to do it. I get that. But we are still in litigation, so a final decision has not been made, yet we're going to try to do this. And then thirdly, where's the money coming from?
Right.
Who gives me hang on, I did the math. Who gives me $1,950,000 to do this over the course of X amount of years per year for however many schools it is? This is basing it on 6 schools, I get that. But where is this pot of money? Is it coming, obviously I think I know where it's coming from us, but I'm curious, is the state gonna kick in any money to help subsidize this amount of money that we're being asked to do these things for? And I get it's about education, about kids, I get that.
Yeah, I'll be happy to look and see. I know most of the conversation on the 7069 litigation has had to do, or much of it has had to do with the distribution of capital outlay funds to charter schools. And the court has not enjoined that. Districts are expected, even though we're in the course of litigation, districts are expected to comply, implement the statute, and then if it is determined to be unconstitutional, we'll unscramble those eggs. And I think you've sort of answered your own question as to number 3, where's the money coming from?
Yes.
I am not aware of a separate appropriation for this.
Really?
Yes, how about that?
So we need to get with the appropriations chair then and request that
whoever the appropriation person is, we need to ask them for one.
Ask them for some money.
Yes, ma'am.
But the other thing is, are any other districts going to basically say, no, we are not, or cannot financially afford to do?
Yes, ma'am, and I'll put out the feeler on that one.
Thank you.
And one thing that I would like to mention before I shut up is the conversation that we're having today is a high-level one.
Yes.
I have not seen, presumably we have not seen a draft contract to do what we're talking about. They're making a proposal, and we would use that proposal to negotiate a contract. That may be a tricky contract to negotiate, and I want you to be aware of that, simply because there's a correlation, many different correlations, I'm sure, and I'm sure that Dr. Akes has been doping this out. But there's a big correlation between the accountability of the entity that comes in to run it and their ability to actually do it, right. And if we are telling them you're going to need to do this with the existing staff and the existing leadership, they are probably going to want to have language in the contract that touches on the degree to which they would be accountable for using someone else's staff.
And that's fine.
So we'll have to be very careful in there, and if the model is that the employees, that they're coming in to provide consulting services, and that the staff and leadership at the school remain district offices, district employees, members of the Florida retirement system and all that, that's different than if you're hiring someone to come in and use your building, bring their team in, and run the place. So we will have to be cautious how we do that, distinguishing between employees and independent contractors and that sort of thing.
Mrs. Sellers?
That, part of that was, are we going to, because we are choosing the least expensive, we've had experience with them, it's really, to me, this was the best of both worlds because it seems like we are gonna have more control, more true collaboration. We're not really turning our schools over without having a major say. We can keep leaders that we feel like are good leaders. But are we going to have a commitment? Because I can see things that they may need. They may, at this price, do all that they do. But these schools are gonna need after-school tutoring and bus service to get the kids
That's
home.
what I mean.
What?
That stays in place.
Yeah,
That's right.
but,
Yeah, that
but
stays
we're
in place.
committed to giving those
Oh, yeah.
supports.
Yes, we are.
And,
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
the only other thing, I would love to tell the state no, but the reality, if we're ever gonna say no to the state, we've got to get our community and our business leaders to stand with us. Us standing up and sending our superintendent up to defy the state is really foolishness. If we ever want to do that, we have got to have our community and our business people behind us as a complete district if we want to disagree with the state. And to your answer, a couple of the districts did withhold from, because they're in litigation, and they wanted to put it in escrow, the money that they needed to pay their charters for the capital outlay, like he said. And I think they are gonna end up writing those checks anyway. The answer was no, you can't put it in escrow and wait until the litigation is over. So it seems like, even though we're challenging 7069, everybody believes that we must follow it and obey it. We can't, there's
Well, I
no
understand
waiting.
that. That's why I
There's
wanted
no
to
waiting,
find out if
yes.
there's others. That's all.
Well, it's a different
Right.
issue. I mean, this
Yeah.
is
Right.
a different issue.
Different animals.
It's a different issue, but the two districts that defied them about withholding money, I think they decided they're gonna write the check. At least one, I know at least one said, we're gonna go ahead and write the check. The penalties were gonna greatly outweigh trying to defy them. But, anyway, thank you. I think this doesn't seem a lot different to me from what we've already had to do with
Right.
our, so,
Except it's a little more flexible.
It's just a little
Yeah.
more flexible, more of it, that's it.
so it's,
Mr. Townsend?
I just, to Kay's point about assuring the public about, I mean, the state actively sabotaged Kathleen Middle and like Alfred Adair last year. They came in using VAM, which they're going to do again, transferred a bunch of people out, destabilized those schools. Kathleen Middle, we wouldn't be talking about Kathleen Middle right now if they had left Kathleen Middle alone. I'm not as clear about like Alfred Adair, but we've turned it into a magnet school. There's no way to guarantee the public anything. The state is going to try to destroy those schools. That's what they're here for. They're here to destroy public education and to destroy those schools. If you're in a school, they're here to destroy it. And I'm not going to be part of that. I'm not. And you know, that's everybody has to make their own decisions about this stuff. If there are personal consequences for a moral question, for a fundamentally moral, honorable question, we all have to look at our own consciences about it, and I'm willing to do that. But tell you, the moment you take this vote, you own it. The public is going to think we own it. They did before. And that's what the state is banking on. They're banking on making us own it, so that they don't have to. That's how they're going to destroy education. That's what they're trying to do. I'm not going to own it.
Well, first of all, I just can't thank Superintendent Byrd and her staff enough for working so hard in negotiating this particular arrangement with Educational Directions. It provides us with the flexibility to continue effectively managing those schools. And I want to offer this. I have complete confidence in Superintendent Byrd and her staff to turn those schools around. I absolutely do. She has a background, a demonstrated history of doing that, a background in doing that. There's no one at the state. There's no one in the Department of Education. There's no one we're going to find to take over these schools that has that background, it has that history. And it's just really disappointing and frustrating and stunning to me that our state wouldn't partner with us in helping us find solutions. I think, at least in part, this goes back to what we saw happen in in Pinellas County with the failure factories and the embarrassment that was to the state and throwing everybody under the same bus once that happened. But we're not Pinellas County. We have an entirely different situation here. We've demonstrated success. So I have confidence in Superintendent Byrd's ability to do this. I think this is a win-win in that, number one, I think it's a contract that will fly based on what the state's asking us to do, but at the same time it gives us control over those schools. It allows our staff to stay there and continue working with those students. And you know, I'm with Mr. Townsend. I would like for some of our state representatives to come down here and sit with us when we have teachers and parents and students coming to us crying and begging us not to move those teachers out because this is the first time that their child has connected with a teacher. It's the first time that their child is learning. And while the state may see those schools as being C and D and F schools, those parents don't see it that way. And quite frankly, it's a product of a flawed grading system, and it's terribly inappropriate and unfortunate for our community. I will offer this: if the state does not agree to this contract, and we'll vote on this as a board, and what I'm hearing is that we kind of like the opportunity to work with educational directions because, among other things, if those schools are C schools, they're going to return them to us, and we won't be obligated to pay the rest of that contract, which will save us a lot of money. But if the state doesn't work with us on this, my tendency will be to stand with Mr. Townsend and say, look, we're going to push back because you can't keep destroying our students and our community in that way. So I'm hoping they will see this as an opportunity to work with us. If they really care about education, they will. And we'll turn those schools around, and it will be a success story. So that's my take on it. And if there are other comments, I'm happy to hear them.
I just had one quick question. Thank you guys so much for this. I know you especially have lost a lot of sleep over it in the past couple months. Last time we spoke about it, you had mentioned that 5 other schools had petitioned. Is that anything that we think is a possibility? I realize that we have to select a plan, but
Right.
Are we looking at also still trying to petition?
We did look at that, and we looked at what those 5 districts that did, the schools that they petitioned the state for, they were not on the persistent local formula list multiple years.
Okay.
These schools have been.
Their first, okay.
And they changed, flipped over more staff too.
Okay.
Ms. Sells?
I will say, when we were in Tallahassee, Colleen Burton did say if there was any difficulty with this process, to please let her office know. She would be very willing to help assist you. So I took that. I think she was very sincere in that. And through Wendy, you can work with her if you get difficulty or pushback from the state. She's willing to stand with you. So.
And again,
Use
if I'm,
her.
absolutely, and if I might add, with this particular, with educational directions, they're working with us, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so we're leading that charge. We're going to continue doing the successful things we've been doing. They will assist us. And we have the option of continuing to use their help if we want. Is that correct? Dr.
Yes.
Okay. So I think this is a win-win for us, assuming the state will work with us on it. Any other comments from the board? Yes, ma'am.
I don't remember how it was phrased in the article that Eric wrote concerning the turnaround schools, but there was an ending statement by Kelly Stargell. And I would encourage us to, all of us, reach out to her and let her know that in every one of the schools that we're talking about, there is learning going on there. And that we don't have a bunch of dumb kids. And to me, the comments that she made was very defensive and put those kids all in a box, and they're not in the same box. And we need to invite her to come to those 6 schools. It's just one. If she would just come to one and have an open mind and see exactly what we're doing with those kids, because the staff, they're working their behinds off. But if you don't come and if you don't see, then you have already formalized your opinion. And her opinion, to me, is very wrong. And Mr. Harris talked about, Mr. Albritton. I think you need to add her to the list. Invite her to come, so she can see.
differences while she comes.
And Colleen both committed while we were meeting with them. Once the session's over, they would be more than willing to do school district work.
Well, we need to add her to the list.
Colleen's already visited Kathleen Middle. She hasn't done anything. She sat there and go, "Oh, Kathleen Middle's awesome. We don't need to close it." She's not going to do anything. She's going to sit there and do what Richard tells her to do. I mean, it's useless to talk to her. I mean, I appreciate you trying to make that effort, but there's no action going to come from that. The only action is going to come here, and from mobilizing our public against them. Again, Colleen said to our faces, "Oh, that's not, Kathleen Mills, good school." So that and $5 gets us $5. I mean, anyway.
Okay, any other board comments?
That concludes our discussion items. Thank you, Dr. Yates. The only other two items that we did not receive any information on was the two items 6 and 7, which were informational items only.
And I'd just like to thank Mrs. Sellers for making sure that we had the names of the folks who voted on that, because I'm always worried that it's going to be a small group that makes that decision, then somebody's going to come back later. And so thank you for making sure we had the list of the committee members. I appreciate that.
Back over to you.
Okay, so I guess that concludes our agenda. Is there any other, anything else for the good of the school board?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I will need at the February 27th meeting to schedule an attorney-client session to talk about matters that are allowed under 286.011. We'll arrange for the court reporter and all that, but I need to announce in a public meeting, which is this, that I intend to meet with you on the 27th for that purpose. So I've made that announcement. It'll be for the board, myself, and counsel to come and talk about settlement negotiations and litigation strategy.
Will that be during the work session?
We typically schedule it during the work session so as not to interrupt the board meeting. Yes, ma'am. We have things to talk about.
Yes, ma'am.
Question, on the agenda item was investment report as of 12/31/17. Is that going to be just passed out for us to review? What it was, I'm just asking, usually they hand it out, no? Okay.
No, I don't, we could provide
It's all
that
good,
next
I
meeting.
can print it, it's all right. Usually you get up and say something.
Okay. Anything else? In that case, meeting.